Before we head into the next story, can I ask you something? When was the last time you heard a noise in your house and ignored it? Do you remember what it sounded like? A creak, a knock, a whisper? Sometimes we brush off what we're not ready to face. Let's hope that's not the case with this next story. Story 1. The clock that counts down. Do you hear the rain tonight? Good. That means you're in the right place. Because this story only happens when the rain falls steady. When the sound is just enough to blur the edges between here and there. Before I begin, do me a favor. Look at your walls, your shelves, your nightstand. Is there a clock in the room with you right now? Not digital, analog, ticking. Can you hear it? And more importantly, is it counting the right way? This story is about a man named Julian. He wasn't superstitious, didn't believe in ghosts or curses. He was a collector of antiques, an old soul, the kind of person who wandered estate sales not looking for deals, but for stories. Old things fascinated him. He believed objects held echoes of the people who used them, a kind of energy, memory and matter. He didn't believe they could hurt you until the day he found the clock. It was tucked in the back corner of a dusty antique store in Rhode Island, a place that smelled of mold and mothballs. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, but then he saw it, a small wall-mounted wooden clock, dark cherry wood, gold hands, the numbers carved, not printed. But the strange thing, there were no hour markings, just a single dial, a hand that ticked slowly, backward. He thought it was a novelty. Asked the old woman behind the counter how it worked. She stared at him for a moment too long. "It doesn't tell time," she said. "It tells how much you have left." He laughed. She didn't. Still, the price was too good. He bought it, brought it home, hung it above the hallway between the kitchen and the bedroom. It ticked softly, one click every second. But instead of moving clockwise, it turned against the grain, counterclockwise, smooth, unbothered. That night, he dreamed. He was standing in his hallway, the clock ticking above him. But the hands moved faster, spinning in reverse. And beneath it was a door that didn't exist in his real home. A black door, no handle, just the ticking and whispers behind it. He woke up gasping. The clock was still ticking. He tried to forget the dream, but it repeated, night after night. Same hallway, same black door. Only now, he could hear the whispers more clearly. They said, "Soon." He told himself it was stress. Work had been difficult. He was drinking too much coffee. He was dreaming, and dreams aren't real. But then, things started changing. First, the hallway got colder, even with the heater on. A draft he couldn't find, a chill that clung to his bones. Then, he noticed the clock's hand ticking faster, at first imperceptibly. But one night, he timed it. It ticked twice per second, and every time he blinked, it seemed just a bit further along than it should have been. He tried removing it from the wall, but the nails wouldn't budge. The wood behind it cracked, splintered, like it was growing into the house. He covered it with a towel. The next morning, the towel was gone, and the clock's hand was now at the halfway point. He remembered the woman's words. "It tells how much you have left." He checked his health, went to a doctor. Everything was fine, but he didn't feel fine. He started to forget things. Small at first. Names, dates, keys, then bigger. He forgot how to get to work, forgot his landlord's name, forgot why he'd even bought the clock in the first place. And still, it ticked, backward, faster, and the dreams, became waking visions. He saw the black door now, not only in dreams, but reflected in windows, in mirrors, in puddles when it rained. And the whispers, they weren't behind the door anymore. They were in the walls, calling his name. One night, he came home and found the hallway different, longer, 3 more steps than usual. And at the end, the black door was there, real, solid, standing where his bathroom used to be. He called the police. They came, walked the hallway, saw only the wall, no door, but Julian saw it, plain as day. The officers left, muttering about sleep deprivation. Julian didn't sleep that night. He watched the clock. It was spinning now, too fast to follow. And at midnight, it stopped. The hand pointed straight up, and the door opened. Inside was nothing, a void, black, still, but not empty. He could feel something in it, waiting. He ran, spent the night in his car, came back the next morning. The door was gone, but the clock was ticking again, backwards, from the start, as if it had chosen someone else now. Julian gave the clock away to a local thrift shop, burned the wall where the door had appeared, moved states, started over, but the dreams followed. He still sees the hallway, the door, the whispers, and sometimes when he passes an old building, he hears ticking and sees someone else staring at a wall as a black door slowly appears. Story 2. The photo album that wasn't empty. Do you remember what your childhood face looked like? Not from a mirror, not from memory, but from a photograph. One of those old, glossy ones you find buried in a shoebox in the attic. Maybe stuck to another photo in the corner from years of heat. Now, imagine finding an album filled with your photos, only you don't remember any of them. The places, the people around you, the clothes you're wearing. They all feel just slightly off, like a dream you can't explain but recognize in your bones. What would you do if the album kept updating itself with new photos of your future? Photos that haven't happened yet. This story is about a woman named Miriam, 54 years old, retired school librarian, lived alone in a house on the outskirts of a small town in Oregon. She liked the quiet, liked old novels, hot tea, the sound of wind rustling leaves at night. After her mother passed away, she inherited the family home, a place she hadn't set foot in for nearly 30 years. The house was ordinary in most ways. Faded blue paint, creaky floorboards, too many closets. It sat on a hill just high enough that on foggy mornings, it looked like it was floating. She moved in on a Tuesday. The first few days were peaceful. She dusted off the furniture, sorted her mother's dishes, and started reading again in the front room with the big window that faced the pine-covered valley below. But then in the attic, behind a false panel in the far corner, she found a leather-bound photo album. There was no title, no dust on it, like someone had just placed it there. Curious, she brought it downstairs. The cover was smooth, untouched by time. The clasp opened easily, and inside were photographs of her, Miriam, as a child, maybe 5, maybe 6 years old, standing in front of a white farmhouse she didn't recognize, wearing clothes she never remembered owning. In the next photo, she was inside a kitchen, also unfamiliar, looking up at a man whose face was blurred, but whose hand rested gently on her shoulder. She flipped faster. Dozens of photos, all of her, a few alone, many with blurred figures. One with a woman holding her hand, but the woman's body was transparent, as if caught in the middle of disappearing. The rooms, The furniture, the places, none of them matched her childhood. But she was there, looking into the camera, smiling, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She closed the book, hands trembling. She didn't sleep that night. The morning after Miriam found the album, she sat at her kitchen table with the book closed in front of her, a cup of tea growing cold in her hand. Rain tapped gently on the windows. The sound was familiar, comforting, until she realized she couldn't remember when it started. She opened the album again. The photographs were the same. For a moment, she felt relief. Maybe it was just some strange trick of the past. Maybe her mother had taken these photos, and she had simply forgotten. Memories from early childhood often blur, right? But then she reached the final photo she'd seen the night before. Her, sitting in a chair in a room she didn't recognize, staring directly at the camera, and noticed something impossible. There was now another photo after it. She hadn't seen this one yesterday. In the new photo, she stood at her front window, the one facing the valley, wearing the exact robe and slippers she had on right now. Her breath caught. She looked up. The window was in front of her. She stood slowly, moved toward it, afraid of what she might see outside. Nothing, just fog, trees, the distant power lines barely visible through the gray mist. She returned to the table. Her hands trembled as she turned the page. Another photo had appeared. She was asleep in bed, the lamp beside her glowing faintly, mouth slightly open, blanket pulled to her chest. She flipped again. There was a photo of her in the kitchen, making tea. She hadn't done that yet today. She turned her head toward the kettle, which sat cold and empty. She hadn't even filled it. The photo showed it steaming. For the next hour, she sat frozen. The rain continued, steady as breath. When she finally stood, she placed the album back in the drawer and told herself something she didn't quite believe. It's a prank or a glitch. I'm tired. That's all. She filled the kettle, made tea, stared at the cabinet where the album now rested behind 2 dish towels. Didn't touch it for the rest of the day. But that night, she had a dream. She was in the hallway at a house that felt familiar, but wasn't hers. There were no light fixtures, only a thin gray glow leaking in from beneath the door at the far end. The floorboards creaked beneath her bare feet. The walls whispered. She couldn't make out words, only a rhythm that sounded too much like her own name. When she reached the door, she tried to open it, but it didn't budge. Instead, it clicked open on its own. Just a crack. Enough for her to see a room full of shelves. And on the shelves, albums. Hundreds, maybe thousands. All identical to the ones she had found. Some open, some closed, some with names on the covers. Her name. Then she heard something behind her, a sound like the turning of a page. She spun around and woke up. The rain hadn't stopped. Over the next several days, the album added more photos. She didn't take them. No one did. There was no camera in the house. Yet the photos continued to appear, always one at a time, always at night, always showing things that hadn't happened yet, but would, always showing her, eating, sleeping, washing dishes, reading in the front room, staring out windows. Then one day, a photo appeared that froze her in place. It showed her dead. She was in the kitchen, collapsed at the table, eyes open, mouth agape. The window behind her glowed with morning light. She wore her favorite gray cardigan, the one she hadn't worn in weeks. The photo was crisp, clean, clear, no blur, no doubt. She slammed the album shut and shoved it back into the drawer. She spent the next 3 days without looking at it. barely ate, barely slept. Every creak in the floor felt like a warning. Every shadow on the wall looked like the silhouette of something about to happen. And every night, she dreamed of the door. It was always there at the end of the hallway, always opening just a bit more, always revealing a few more albums on shelves. One night, she saw a woman inside. Not just any woman, herself, sitting at a table, flipping through an album, except the woman looked older, thinner, hollow, and when she looked up from the pages, her eyes were completely white. On the fourth morning since the last new photo appeared, Miriam opened the drawer out of instinct, almost expecting the album to be gone. It wasn't. It was exactly where she left it, beneath the dish towels, sitting in the dark, quiet and still. But when she touched it, it was warm, as if someone had just been holding it. Her hand recoiled, her breath caught. She didn't want to look inside, but she couldn't stop herself. She pulled the album out and unclasped it, and there it was, a new photo. She stood in the attic, covered in dust, looking down at something in her hands, something she couldn't make out clearly. Her expression was blank, not sad, not scared, just resigned. She had not been in the attic since the day she found the book. She didn't want to go back, but the photo was dated. Tomorrow. It was the first time a photo had a written date. March 16th, 3:12 p.m. And the more she stared at the photo, the more she noticed, behind her, in the shadows of the attic, stood another figure, barely visible, tall, thin, faceless. She shut the album and stood from the table so fast her chair tipped over. She didn't pick it up. That day, she drove into town, tried to act normal, bought groceries she didn't need, talked to the cashier too long, stared at people's faces like she hadn't seen another soul in weeks. Maybe she hadn't really. Maybe she was already slipping. She walked past the antique shop at the edge of Main Street and paused. There, in the window, was an album, identical to hers. Black leather. No title. Gold clasp. Her heart thudded. She stepped inside. The shop was dim and silent. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel natural. No clerk. No music. No other customers. She approached the album in the display. Before she could touch it, a voice came from the back. Looking for yourself? A woman stepped out of the shadows. Her eyes were milky white. I have one of these, Miriam said. The woman nodded slowly. Most do, only some know it. What is it? The woman tilted her head. A map, a cage, a mirror, depends on who you ask. Miriam opened the album on the table. The pages were blank, except for one, a single photograph. Miriam, standing in her kitchen, holding the album, looking out the shop window. Right now, she looked up, but the window was dark. Rain poured hard, blurring the street outside. She looked back at the woman, but she was gone. The shop was empty. The door behind her was open. A bell rang that she hadn't heard when she entered. She backed out slowly, didn't take the album, didn't say another word, just got in her car and drove. That night, she didn't sleep. She placed the album on the floor beside her bed and stared at the ceiling, listened to the storm, heard things in it that didn't belong to wind or water, a soft dragging sound, like feet sliding across the floorboards, a whisper of her name, not from inside her mind, but from somewhere just outside her window. She didn't move, didn't breathe, until morning came, and the clock struck 3 p.m. At 3:06 p.m., Miriam stood at the bottom of the attic stairs. Her hands were shaking. Her pulse beat behind her eyes. She held the album in her arms like a shield, her fingers clutching the spine until her knuckles turned white. The storm outside had picked up. Rain slammed the roof. Wind pressed against the walls like something trying to get in, or maybe something trying to keep her inside. She took the first step. The wood groaned beneath her weight. Each creak echoed louder than the last. When she reached the top, she paused. The air was still and dry. No draft, no sound, as if the attic had been waiting with held breath. The light bulb above her head buzzed softly, then flickered out. Darkness. She clicked her flashlight on. The beam sliced across stacks of boxes, draped furniture. Old books and photo frames turned inward to face the wall. Her eyes moved to the far corner, the space where she had first found the album. Empty, but the dust was disturbed. Footprints leading toward her, then vanishing. She turned slowly, her breath fogging in front of her. Something had changed. The attic felt larger than before, deeper, like the walls had pulled back. And then she saw it. At the far side of the attic, where there had once been nothing but insulation and a sloped roof, now stood a door. Black, wooden, tall, with no handle. Only a circular symbol carved at eye level. 12 notches around the edge. 11 worn with time. The 12th freshly gouged. She knew this door. She had seen it in her dreams. She stepped forward, slowly. Each breath felt heavier. When she stood before the door, she lifted the album. It vibrated faintly in her hands. She opened it. One photo. Her, standing before the door, flashlight in hand, mouth slightly open in shock. Now, the photo had been taken now, and just below the image, written in small, elegant handwriting, turn the page. Her fingers trembled. She turned the page. The next photo showed the door open. Inside, blackness. Depth, no floor, no walls. And her, stepping inside. Behind her, in the photo, a figure loomed tall, blurred, with hands that reached toward her back. Miriam shut the book. No. She stepped back. The floor creaked beneath her. The door stayed shut, but the air behind her changed. She turned. A shadow stood between her and the attic stairs. Not a person. A shape. It didn't move. Didn't speak. It just watched. Miriam lifted the album like a weapon. I didn't ask for this, she said, voice shaking. I don't want this. The figure tilted its head. Then it stepped aside, silently, as if granting her a choice. Behind it, the staircase remained, the way back, but her eyes drifted again to the door. Her breath slowed, and deep inside her mind a memory surfaced. A room, a camera, a voice that whispered, "We choose the ones who will remember. We choose the keepers." She dropped the album. It hit the floor with a sound like thunder. The door opened. Miriam stood frozen. The door had opened on its own. No creak. No dramatic burst. Just a quiet, effortless parting of something that had never been meant to open again. The inside was not black, not entirely. It was the color of forgiveness, of rot and dust and things buried under time. And in the center of it all, floating as if caught in still water, hung an album, identical to hers, but larger, thicker. Its pages fluttered as if breathing. She stepped forward. Her hand reached for the doorframe, but it burned at her touch, not with heat, but with memory. She remembered being a child. She remembered standing in a room filled with light that hummed like old film. and someone, not her mother, had told her, if you open the wrong book, you don't get to close it. Tears blurred her vision. She stepped across the threshold. The moment her foot landed on the other side, the attic behind her was gone. Now there was only this space. Infinite, quiet, alive. She approached the floating album. It pulsed with each of her heartbeats. When she reached out to touch it, a voice, faint, cold, right behind her ear whispered, "Take your place." And the album opened. Pages flipped rapidly, faster than she could follow. Each one showed versions of her. Some she recognized, real memories. Others were possibilities, roads not taken. One page showed her pregnant, sitting beside a man she had never met. Another showed her drowning. Another, old and alone in a room filled with clocks. Another showed her exactly as she was now. She screamed, backed away. "No, I don't belong here." The pages stopped flipping, and the book spoke, not aloud, but inside her. Then who does? She looked down at her hands. They were fading, not disappearing, but becoming translucent, as if her story was being unwritten. The book waited. She turned. Behind her, a hallway had formed, endless, lined with thousands of bookshelves. Each shelf held photo albums, and on the spines, names, some familiar, some impossible. She moved down the hall, found an album with her mother's name, opened it. Inside, photos she had never seen. Her mother as a girl, a teenager, a young woman, smiling, crying, screaming, standing before the same black door. And then, in the last photo, holding Miriam as a baby, just outside the attic. In her arms, the album. Miriam closed the book slowly. She now understood. This place wasn't a trap. It was an archive, a repository for lives that were marked by grief, by memory, by a question never answered. She heard footsteps behind her, turned. A figure approached. It was a woman from the antique store, but younger, eyes still white, but glowing faintly now. "You remembered," the woman said. Miriam nodded. "I didn't want to." The woman held out her hand. "You don't have to stay, but the book will, and it needs a guardian." Miriam looked back at her own album, now resting gently on a pedestal of unseen material. Closed, waiting. She didn't speak. She just stepped forward and placed her hand on the cover. It pulsed once, then was still. She woke up in her bed. Sunlight leaked through the curtains. Birds chirped faintly outside. The rain had stopped. She sat up slowly, felt the ache of something having passed through her. On her nightstand sat a new book, smaller, leather-bound, no photos inside, just blank pages. And on the first page, handwritten in the same small, elegant script as before. This time, you choose what gets remembered. And ever since that day, whenever someone new moves into that house on the hill, they sometimes hear a faint clicking sound above the ceiling, like pages turning, like photographs being placed carefully between paper and silence. And once, just once, a boy found an old photo album in the attic. He said it was empty, but his mother remembers him talking in his sleep that night. He whispered, "Don't forget me." Story 3. The calls always come from the basement. Do you hear that? Not the rain. That's always there. Listen beneath it. Lower. The sound behind the sound. The ringing. Old-fashioned. Shrill. Hollow. Like something calling through time instead of wires. This story begins with a man named Caleb. He wasn't the kind of person who scared easily. Not because he was brave, but because he didn't have time for fear. Divorced, 43, worked construction during the day, drank too much at night. His dog, Murphy, was the only constant in his life. A tired old black lab with cloudy eyes and a limp from a fall years ago. When his father died, Caleb inherited the house. It sat on a quiet road at the edge of a dying town in Michigan. Red bricks, moss on the shingles, and a basement that always smelled like wet concrete and rust. He didn't want the house, but it was free and he was broke, so he moved in. The first few days were uneventful. The house creaked like old houses do. The pipes moaned when the water ran. The basement door stuck when the weather turned humid. Nothing out of the ordinary until the phone rang. It was a Tuesday night. He had just finished dinner, steak and a warm can of beer, when Murphy began to growl. Not bark, growl, low and long, staring at the basement door. Caleb followed his gaze. Then he heard it ring, not from his cell, not from the landline upstairs, which he had disconnected years ago. It came from below. He opened the basement door. Darkness. And from somewhere down in that black cement belly of the house, ring. Oh, echoing. Mechanical. The kind of ring you don't hear anymore. He grabbed a flashlight. Stay, he told Murphy. The dog didn't argue. Step by step, he descended the stairs. The air was damp. The temperature dropped with each footfall. At the bottom, he swept the light across the room. Exposed pipes, a water heater, boxes, paint cans, and in the far corner, a small wooden table. On it, covered in a thin sheet of dust, a rotary phone, black, glossy, untouched. It rang again. Ring. He stared at it, didn't touch it, didn't speak. After the fourth ring, it stopped. The silence that followed felt worse. He approached slowly, shining the light over the phone's base. No cord, no power line, nothing, just the phone. He left it there, went back upstairs, didn't sleep. The next morning it was still there, silent. That night it rang again. This time he picked it up. His hand shook as he brought it to his ear. Static, then breathing. His own, not just similar, identical. He said, "Hello?" And the voice on the other end whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." He slammed the receiver down, ran upstairs, locked the basement door. The next day, he told himself it was a prank, maybe some radio interference, some kind of feedback. He Googled rotary phones, interference, audio hallucinations. Nothing explained it. The third night, it rang at 3:12 a.m. When he answered, the voice was louder, and it said, "I know what you did." After the third call, Caleb unplugged the lamp in the basement and smashed it against the wall. The phone didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even shift on the table. It just sat there, waiting. He went upstairs and shoved the door shut, sliding a chair under the knob. But even then he couldn't rest. His ears were too tuned now. Every creak in the floor became a whisper. Every gust of wind in the vents felt like breath down his neck. Every silence dragged with weight, like something holding its breath just out of sight. He stayed awake the entire night, eyes on the door, Murphy pressed against his leg. The next morning, he tried to explain it away. Sleep deprivation, stress, isolation. Maybe he'd never noticed the phone before. Maybe his father had put it there. Maybe he had forgotten. But when he called his sister, Allison, to ask if she remembered phone in the basement, her voice went cold. "No, Dad didn't like phones." "What do you mean?" She hesitated. He said they carried voices that didn't belong to us. Caleb almost dropped the receiver. She continued. Sometimes I heard him talking down there, but there was no one else in the house. I thought he was losing it. He didn't tell her what he heard. He didn't tell anyone. That night, it rang again, 3:12 a.m., as if on schedule. He let it ring 6 times before answering. Hello. The static was louder now, sharper, almost painful. Then the voice spoke. Not a whisper this time. Clear, still his own voice, but older, angrier. You think you buried it, but it's not done with you. He shouted into the receiver. What do you want from me? No answer, only breathing. Then, check the floor. The line went dead. He stood in the basement, hours later, barefoot, flashlight in hand, staring at the concrete floor beneath the table. It looked normal, but that word meant nothing anymore. He got a hammer and a chisel, chipped slowly. Hours passed, until he found what beneath the concrete, a trapdoor, old, warped, locked. He broke it open. The smell that escaped was not of this world. Rot, mold, and something else. Something like old film vinegar, metal, and sorrow. He opened it fully. Stairs descended into darkness. And at the bottom, he saw it. A second phone. Identical. But this one was ringing already. And the voice it carried wasn't his. The stairs beneath the trapdoor didn't belong to the house. Caleb knew at the moment his foot touched the first step. The wood was too dry, the grain too straight. The air shifted, denser, somehow like descending underwater. The flashlight dimmed the further down he went, even with new batteries. Murphy didn't follow. He stood at the top of the basement steps, whining. Caleb descended anyway. 13 steps. No more, no less. At the bottom was a room. It had no walls. At least none that he could see. Only dark. And in the middle, lit by a cold blue glow, stood the second phone. Identical, but this one was off the hook. The receiver dangled, swaying slightly. He stepped forward. No sound. No echo of footsteps, as if the space swallowed everything but the ring. He picked it up. No static, just silence. Then breathing, but not like before. Not his own. This breath was labored, strained, pain. And then the voice spoke. Female, shaking. Caleb, it hurts. He froze. Who is this? I waited. What are you talking about? You left me? His chest tightened. Left who? You were supposed to come back. You promised. The voice cracked. Cried. You said you'd be quick. The room seemed to close in around him. And then he remembered. He was 8. The woods behind the house. A game of hide and seek. And Lily, his cousin, smaller than him, always trying to keep up. He had told her to hide. Don't come out until I find you, he'd said. But he never did. He forgot. He went inside. Dinner. Bed. No one asked where Lily was. In the morning, the police were called. They searched for days. Found nothing. His parents told him not to blame himself. But that day in the woods, he had known where she was hiding. He just never said it. He dropped the phone. It didn't hit the floor. It just vanished midair. The light in the room dimmed. And then, from the dark, footsteps, child-sized, slow, scraping the floor. He turned and ran. Up the stairs, into the basement. Slammed the trapdoor shut. Nailed it. move furniture on top of it. That night, the first phone rang again. 3:12 a.m. This time, he didn't answer. He unplugged the flashlight, sat in the dark with Murphy at his side, shaking. The phone rang for 7 minutes. Then silence. He checked the basement the next day. The trapdoor was gone, but the table had 2 phones on it now, both off the hook. After the second phone appeared on the table, Caleb stopped going into the basement. He locked the door, piled furniture against it, slept with Murphy curled at his feet, and a loaded shotgun beside the bed. But it didn't matter, because the phones didn't need the basement anymore. The ringing followed him. He began hearing it in the walls, in the plumbing, in the silence between heartbeats. Not loud, insistent, always the same tone. Mechanical, cold, unforgiving. One night, the TV turned on by itself, flickered between static and snowy images of the woods behind the house, the same place where Lily had disappeared. Caleb stood frozen, holding the remote in his hand, knowing he hadn't pressed anything. And then the screen went black. A reflection stared back at him. Not his. Close, but not right. Younger, wide-eyed, lips slowly forming a word. Liar. The power went out. That same night, Murphy vanished. No open doors. No broken windows. Just a faint trail of wet paw prints leading to the basement door. They ended there. The phones rang for an hour. Caleb screamed, cried, begged. No one answered until they did. 3:12 a.m. Again, he answered on the first ring. The voice on the line was soft, gentle. Do you want him back? His mouth went dry. Yes. You know what you have to give. I don't understand. Yes, the voice said. You do. And then, as if the line shifted hands, another voice took over. Feminine, small, tired. Caleb, I'm cold. Lily, I was so scared. I waited so long. He collapsed to his knees. Phone pressed his face. I'm sorry. I was a kid. I didn't mean to. You forgot me. I didn't. I swear. You forgot my face. He couldn't respond, because it was true. He couldn't remember her face. Not fully. Not anymore. Only the guilt. And then the voice said, come downstairs. The line went dead. He didn't want to go, but he couldn't stop himself. Like something pulled at his spine. The hallway lights flickered as he passed. The basement door opened before he touched it. The stairs no longer creaked. And when he reached the bottom, the table was gone. So were the phones. In their place was a mirror. Tall, dirty, old. He stepped toward it, saw himself, but younger, different, wearing muddy clothes, leaves in his hair, the woods behind him. The boy in the mirror turned, held out his hand, and Caleb felt himself accepting it. He woke up on the floor, daylight pouring in from the basement window. Silence. He climbed the stairs. The living room was empty, cold, still. Murphy lay by the door, alive, sleeping. The phones were gone. No more ringing. For a week, things were normal, peaceful. He walked the woods behind the house, planted flowers by an old tree stump where he thought she might have hidden, spoke her name aloud. I remember now. And for the first time in years, he slept through the night until one morning a package arrived. No sender, just his name. Inside, a rotary phone. No cord, no base, just a receiver. And taped to the side, a note in childlike handwriting. for when you forget again. For days, Caleb didn't touch the phone that came in the package. He kept it in the garage, wrapped in towels, hidden inside a locked toolbox beneath a crate of old tools. But it didn't matter, because every night at 3:12 a.m., he heard it. Not a ring, not anymore. Just a click, like someone lifting a receiver on the other end, like someone already there, waiting. The first time he heard the click, he stayed in bed, eyes shut, pretending he hadn't. But the next night, the click came again. Then a whisper, no words, just breath. Right beside his ear, Murphy whined in his sleep. The lights flickered, and the phone, though sealed away, vibrated softly in its metal box. By the third night, the whisper had found its voice again. Do you still remember me? He answered the darkness. Yes. The voice smiled through the air. Then it's time. He retrieved the phone, unwrapped it. Its surface was cold, but dry. The plastic had aged into a dull gray, but the receiver felt new, too clean. He set it on the table, sat down, watched it, and waited. At 3:12, the click came. Then the line hummed. He picked it up, didn't speak. The voice came through. Not Lily this time. Not even his own. A new voice. One he had never heard before. Neutral. Calm. Patient. You carried it longer than most. What is this? Caleb asked. What do you want? You were chosen when you forgot. Forgot what? Her. Yourself. The truth. He swallowed hard. His hands trembled. I remember now. I do. The voice was silent for a moment, then said, Would you like to stop remembering? He froze, his eyes stung with tears. The weight of everything he had felt, guilt, grief, fear, threatened to crack him in half. He asked, what would it cost? The voice whispered, nothing, except the last thing you kept for yourself. He didn't ask what that meant, because he knew his face, his name, his final tether to this world. He closed his eyes, held the receiver tightly, and said, yes. The next morning, a neighbor noticed the front door to the old brick house was wide open. She called the police. They found no one inside. No signs of struggle. No blood. No broken glass. Only a single object sitting neatly in the center of the living room floor. A rotary phone, disconnected, and beside it a photograph, black and white, of a small boy standing at the edge of the woods. No name on the back, no timestamp, just a single phrase written in perfect script. If found, do not answer. Story 4, The Mirror in Room 217. Before we begin, I want you to try something. If you're near a mirror right now, just glance at it. Don't stare too long. Don't study your face. Just look and then look away, because if you linger, you might start to notice things that weren't there before. A flicker behind your eyes, a breath that isn't yours, or worse, your reflection blinking after you already have. This story begins in a place many people have visited, a roadside motel. You know the kind. 2 floors, plastic key cards, curtains that never fully close, air conditioner always too loud, parking lot lit by flickering yellow lights. This particular motel was in New Mexico, isolated, 5 miles off the nearest town, barely visible from the highway. A woman named Ava checked into room 217. She was traveling alone, cross-country, just a backpack, a few $100, and a car that was running out of faith. She wasn't running from something. Not exactly. But she didn't know what she was running to either. That night, it started raining. Hard. So she stayed in, ate crackers, drank from the sink, watched static on the TV for a while, eventually gave up and decided to sleep. That's when she saw it. The mirror. It hung in the far corner of the room, near the closet. She hadn't noticed it earlier. It was large, oval, framed in brass that had darkened with age. No smudges, no cracks, but the reflection was off, just slightly. The angle wasn't right. It caught more of the bed than it should have. And when she moved to the left, her reflection moved slower than she did. She blinked. Her reflection blinked twice. She laughed, shook her head. Sleep deprived, she muttered. But when she turned off the light, she saw something that drained all the warmth from her chest. In the darkness, the mirror glowed faintly, not a reflection, a soft silver shimmer that pulsed like breath. She turned the light back on. It stopped. She walked up to it, stared into the glass. Her own face looked back at her, but it didn't feel like her. There was something behind her eyes, like the reflection was waiting for her to leave. Ava didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the mirror watching her, not from across the room, but from somewhere closer, as if her mind couldn't quite draw the line between her body and the reflection anymore. By 4 a.m., she got out of bed and sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the glass. The rain had softened, but the wind howled. She turned the light off. The mirror glowed again. She turned the light on. It stopped. She repeated the process 5 times. Each time, the glow was brighter. Each time, the reflection took longer to appear, as if it were slowly waking up. She whispered, "Who's there?" No answer, just her own face, with an expression she wasn't making. Eyes slightly wider, mouth more relaxed, like someone tried to mimic her from memory, but missing by a fraction. She moved closer. So did the reflection, but not perfectly in sync. Ava raised her left hand. The reflection raised its right. She tilted her head. It didn't. She stood perfectly still, held her breath, and watched her reflection keep breathing. She left the room at sunrise, packed her things without looking back. The motel clerk didn't ask questions, but as she returned her key, he looked at her a moment too long. "You were in 217, right?" he asked. "Yeah." He hesitated, then said, "That room, the mirror is not supposed to be there. Wasn't there last month, and we didn't install anything." She blinked. "Then where did it come from?" He shrugged. "It shows up sometimes. Always in 217. Never the same shape. Sometimes it's broken, sometimes not." She stared at him, searching for a hint of humor. There was none. "I'd pick another room next time," he said, then went back to his paperwork. Ava drove 3 townsies, booked a room in a new motel, triple-checked for mirrors. There was only one in the bathroom, small, cracked, normal. She tried to relax, tried to sleep, but at exactly 3:12 a.m., she woke up. Something cold brushed her cheek. She sat up. The room was dark, and on the desk across from the bed was a mirror, oval, brass-framed, just like the one from 217. She hadn't brought it. She hadn't seen it when she checked in, but it was there, and in the reflection, she wasn't alone. Ava stared at the mirror on the desk. It hadn't been there when she checked in. She was sure of it. The motel room was plain: bed, desk, small TV, one painting of a mountain. The only mirror had been the small one in the bathroom. Now that mirror was here. Oval, brass frame, exactly like the one from room 217. But this one was different in one small, sickening way. It didn't reflect her room. The walls behind her in the glass were the ones from the first motel. Same curtains, same wallpaper, even though she had left that place hours ago and driven more than 100 miles. She leaned closer, and her reflection didn't move. It just stared at her, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, breathing heavily. Ava whispered, "Were you?" The reflection smiled. Not a human smile, a practice one. Stretched too wide, held too long. It lifted its hand, palm toward her. A slow, deliberate wave. She didn't wave back. Instead, she covered the mirror with a towel. But the smile remained, imprinted in her mind like an afterimage burned into her vision. She left the motel that same night. For the next 3 days, she didn't check into any rooms. She slept in her car, woke up with headaches and ringing ears. Her dreams were filled with reflections of herself, all slightly wrong. Some older, some younger, some with missing pieces. No eyes, no mouth, blank smooth skin. Each one whispered the same thing. "You left me there." On the 4th day, she stopped at a gas station, went inside to pay, passed a small mirror behind the counter, tried not to look, but it caught her attention anyway, because her reflection was already staring at her. Before she turned her head, it mouthed a word, "Stay." She backed out of the store, got in the car, drove with shaking hands. That night, she stayed at a motel in the desert, told the clerk she didn't want any mirrors in the room. He laughed nervously. "Sure, I guess. You one of those folks that believes in mirror spirits or something?" She didn't answer. He gave her the key to room 3. Inside, the room was bare. Just a bed, a fan, a single lamp. She double-checked. No mirror. She locked the door, wedged a chair under the knob, turned off the light, laid down, breathed, waited, and at exactly 3:12 a.m., she heard it, a soft scraping sound, like glass sliding across wood. She sat up, turned on the light, and saw the mirror, standing in the corner, glowing faintly. And in the reflection, she was still asleep. Ava stared at the mirror, glowing no canto, du cordo. Her reflection was still lying on the bed, breathing steadily, deeply, like she hadn't woken up yet. But she had. She was on her feet, heart racing, hands trembling, eyes wide open. So who or what was still asleep in that bed? She stepped closer. Each step made the light inside the mirror pulse stronger. Silver ripples moved across the glass, as if it were water held vertically. Then her reflection opened its eyes, slowly, and smiled. Ava stopped. The reflection sat up, not in sync, not delayed. It moved with purpose. It looked around the room in the mirror, a perfect copy of the one Ava was standing in, and then turned to face her directly. It spoke, not aloud, but from inside the glass. Ava didn't hear the words with her ears. She felt them in the base of her skull, in the pit of her stomach. "You're tired?" She didn't respond. "I can take over. Just rest." The reflection stood, and for the first time, Ava noticed something horrifying. The eyes in the mirror weren't hers. Not exactly. They were darker, rimmed with a faint shimmer. Not human. Something had learned how to look like her, but hadn't perfected it. The mouth moved again. "You left me there. I've waited. I've watched. Now it's your turn. The mirror pulsed. Ava stepped back. The air around her grew thick. Heavy. The room darkened, not from a lamp, but from inside her mind, like a fog spreading behind her eyes. She stumbled, fell to one knee. The reflection in the mirror stepped forward and didn't stop at the glass. Its hand pressed through, not shattered, but passed into her world like a spoon to the surface of a lake. The hand reached for her face. She tried to move, but she couldn't, not fast enough, not anymore. When she woke up, the room was quiet. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains. She sat up slowly, felt calm. Her limbs were heavy, but relaxed, her chest warm. She stood, stretched, walked to the mirror. Her reflection looked back at her, perfectly in sync. No delay, no glitches, just her. Ava smiled, and the reflection smiled with her. But on the other side of the mirror, where the light was dim and silver, Ava sat in the bed, screaming. No voice, no sound, only her own reflection staring back at her from a world that wasn't real, a version of her now wearing her life. And every night at 3:12 a.m., the new Ava looks into the mirror and whispers, "Sleep well." Months later, room 217 was occupied again. A man named Jeremy, business traveler, tired, recently grieving, emotionally empty, flight delayed, back ache, recent divorce. All he wanted was a decent night's sleep. The desk clerk offered him the room at the end of the hall. 217, he said. Quieter. The others are taken. Jeremy accepted without a second thought. He wasn't superstitious or curious, just tired. So tired. That night, Jeremy went to bed without turning on the television. He barely noticed the decor, but he noticed the mirror, oval, antique, hanging above the dresser. He thought it was odd that the motel would keep something so old, but he didn't care. He turned off the light. The rain began to fall, and the mirror began to shine. Jeremy turned over in bed, his eyes heavy but restless. He glanced toward the mirror without getting up, just to check. And for a brief second, he thought he saw someone standing behind him, someone the same height, same haircut, but the eyes were those of a woman. He sat up. He turned on the light. The mirror was empty. Just him, just the room. He laughed, too tired. He laid down again. He closed his eyes. In the mirror, Ava watched. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She waited. And that night, Jeremy slept deeply, more deeply than he had ever slept. As he slept, the mirror glowed brighter, quietly, patiently, hungrily. The mirror from room 217 is still there. It never leaves the door. It appears when you are most tired, most vulnerable, most willing to trade your pain for silence. And all it needs is for you to look long enough for the other side to see you too. Story 5, The Candle That Shows What's Hidden. Have you ever been in a room so dark that when you lit a candle, it didn't feel like it pushed the darkness away? It just made the dark more visible, like it wasn't emptiness around you, but something watching, waiting. This story begins with a man named Desmond. Desmond had just inherited the family farmhouse after the death of his grandmother, a place buried in the hills of rural Pennsylvania, surrounded by trees so dense they swallowed sound. He hadn't been there in over 20 years, not since he was a boy, not since the fire, the one that took his sister, the one that no one talked about. He returned not out of sentiment, but out of necessity. His life in the city had unraveled. Job gone, marriage over, bank account dying. He needed a place to stay. The house still stood, brittle and half forgotten, but upright. Inside, it smelled of dust, dried herbs, and something faintly sweet like burnt sugar. His grandmother had been strange, quiet, the kind of woman who kept doors locked from the inside, hung charms on the doorknobs, and said things like, "Don't look through the window after midnight." She left behind few things: a Bible with a lock clasp, a trunk he couldn't open, and on the mantel above the fireplace, a candle. It was thick, dark burgundy, worn down on one side, like it had burned unevenly for years. No wick was visible, no scent, just wax, heavy and cold. He didn't think much of it, not until the first night. The power went out during a thunderstorm. Typical. He searched drawers for a flashlight. Nothing worked. Then he remembered the candle. He picked it up, turned it in his hand. No wick, but as soon as he held it, the flame appeared. A slow, lazy flame. No sound, no heat, just light. It didn't glow like a normal candle. It flickered low, blue, and didn't illuminate the walls. It created shadows where there shouldn't be any. That's when he noticed them. Shapes on the floor, on the ceiling, figures, not moving, not clear, but there, outlines of things that looked human, but not quite. Long fingers, tilted heads, no mouths. They stood at the edges of the room, unmoving, watching. He looked away. When he looked back, they were gone. The candle still burned. He tried to blow it out, but it didn't go out. No matter how hard he exhaled, it stayed lit. Only when he dropped it back onto the mantel did the flame vanish. Instantly, and the room was dark again. He didn't sleep that night. The next day, Desmond searched for answers. He examined the candle. No markings, no wick, just a smooth, waxy surface that felt cold even under direct sunlight. When he held it in the palm of his hand, it pulsed. Not literally. There was no movement, but he felt it, like holding something that was breathing just under the surface. He put it down, walked away, tried to forget it. That night, the power stayed on. Still, the house felt darker than before. Every corner seemed too deep. Every window seemed to hold reflections that didn't match the room. And just past 3 a.m., he heard the sound. Whispers. Faint. Foreign. Not quite language. More like breath shaped into meaning. He couldn't understand. He went to the mantel. The candle was gone. He spun around. It was on the kitchen table, sitting upright, unlit. He hadn't moved it. He was alone. He didn't want to touch it again. But the room had changed. The shadows were too still, too tall, and the whispers were getting closer. He reached for the candle, and it lit itself. The figures returned. This time, clearer. They stood in the kitchen doorway, behind the refrigerator, on the ceiling, everywhere the light didn't quite reach. And now they were moving, slowly, jerking in short, silent bursts, their heads tilted, their fingers outstretched. Their mouths were missing, as if erased or never drawn at all. Desmond held the candle up. "Who are you?" he whispered. One of them turned, and though it had no mouth, the whisper still came. "You see what she kept hidden?" He dropped the candle. It hit the floor, stayed lit. The flame didn't flicker. It grew, turned dark blue, then violet, then black. The room filled with cold. Desmond backed away until he hit the wall. One figure reached toward the flame, long fingers hovering inches above the surface, then vanished, gone, like it had burned away. He picked up the candle. It went out. The figures were gone, but something new had been left behind. On the floor, beneath where the candle had landed, a burn mark in the shape of a hand. But the fingers were too long, and there were 6 of them. The next morning, Desmond searched the house, not for ghosts, not for monsters, for explanations. In the back room, tucked behind a wardrobe that hadn't been opened in years, he found a small cedar box. Inside, a bundle of dried lavender, a necklace with a black stone, a folded photograph of his grandmother as a young woman, standing beside a man with no face, not blurred, but missing entirely. And finally, a leather-bound journal. The pages smelled of smoke and wax. The handwriting was clean, careful, full of words he didn't expect to see from the woman he knew. The entries started calmly. "I begun using the candle again. It helps me see. Not like before. Not the way they taught us. This is deeper. Then they gather at the edges. Not spirits. Not demons. Something older. They don't come into the light, but they want to." And then I saw her last night. Not a ghost. Her. My girl. My Ada. She stood behind the oven, smiling. But it wasn't her smile. The flame grew dark. I told it to go out. It didn't. Desmond froze. Ada, his sister, she died in this house. In a fire. Everyone said it was an accident. But here, in her own words, his grandmother was saying she saw her after. The next entry chilled him. The candle doesn't protect. It chooses. It allows. It sees. If I stop lighting it, I can't see her anymore. If I keep lighting it, she gets closer. I am so tired. That night, Desmond lit the candle again. Not because he wanted to, because he had to see her. He sat on the floor, cross-legged, the candle between his knees. The flame flickered. The shadows deepened. And from the kitchen doorway, she appeared. Ada, 10 years old, hair singed, eyes glassy, skin gray like old paper. She didn't speak. She just looked at him, and the room filled with a smell he hadn't known he remembered. Burning cloth, charcoal, wet ash. He whispered, "Ada?" She nodded, but she didn't smile. Instead, she pointed to the candle, then to herself, then to him. The flame flared blue, and she mouthed, "You're next." Desmond didn't sleep after seeing her. Ada, the way she looked, the tilt of her head, the way she moved without sound, it was all wrong. But her eyes, they were exactly the same as they'd been the last time he saw her alive, the night of the fire. He remembered the way she screamed for help from the hallway as smoke filled the house. He remembered the door handle being too hot to touch. He remembered running outside, barefoot, crying for help. But something about that memory had always felt edited, incomplete. And now he began to remember more, the part he'd forgotten. He went back to the journal, searched every page. One entry was dated just a week before the fire. She keeps touching the candle when I'm not looking. She says she hears someone inside the flame. I told her not to touch it again, but she doesn't listen. Last night, she said, the candle showed me Desmond's face, but it wasn't him. I think it's starting over. Another entry followed, just days later. I caught Ada whispering to the dark in her room. She was sitting on the floor, drawing symbols in chalk. She doesn't know what they mean. Neither do I. But the candle was burning on her windowsill. I didn't light it. I've seen this before. When I was a girl, my sister vanished. They said she drowned. But I saw her reflection in the candle days later, tapping on the inside of the glass. I buried that candle. This one found me anyway. Desmond stood in front of the fireplace at night, staring at the mantel. The candle sat there, dark, still, but he felt it, like it was waiting for him to agree. To strike the match without needing one. To let it in, he picked it up, and it lit itself. The shadows gathered quickly this time, and Ada stepped forward again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, deeper in the dark, stood another Desmond. Identical. Same shirt, same hair, same eyes, except his smile was hollow and his skin was slightly burned, charred in places. And when he blinked, soot fell from his lashes. Desmond dropped the candle. It rolled under the table, still burning. Ada raised her hand. The burned Desmond stepped forward, spoke. You left us, and now we leave you. He reached out, fingers blackened at the tips, and when Desmond backed away, the flame vanished. Everything went dark. Silence. Then footsteps moving upstairs. In the morning, Desmond woke up on the floor. The candle was back on the mantel. His hands were covered in soot, and carved into the wooden floor beside where he'd been lying was a single word: trade. The next night, Desmond sat in front of the candle with the journal in his lap. He had read the last page again and again. The candle doesn't show the truth. It shows the space around it, what the world hides, what time forgets, what the soul avoids. It only burns in the hands of those who regret. And below that, written in ink that had bled through the page, to unsee is to become the seen. He didn't know what that meant, but he understood enough. At 3:12 a.m., the candle lit itself. The room dimmed, walls pulsing with cold. Shadows thickened. The figures returned. This time, they stood in a circle around him. Ada, the burned version of himself. A man with no mouth. A woman with no skin on her face. A child with empty eye sockets. None of them moved. They just waited. The candle's flame turned black at the center, and for the first time it began to speak. Not a voice, not words, but images flashing inside Desmond's mind. Ada hiding the candle in her room, her lighting it while he slept, the house catching fire without cause, his grandmother arriving too late, a door opening inside the flame, Ada reaching for it, and Desmond watching it burn, without moving. He remembered now. She had called his name. He had frozen, not from fear, from recognition, because he had seen his own face in the candle just before it caught fire, smiling and turning away. The candle hissed. A small ember floated out of the flame and hovered in the air. It hovered in front of his chest, waiting. He understood. A trade. He could stay. Join the shadows. Free her. Or blow it out. But blowing it out wouldn't make the vision stop. It would only lock them in. He whispered, "I'm sorry," to Ada, to himself. And then he inhaled deeply and exhaled over flame. Darkness. A sudden, suffocating void. No light, no sound, no heat. And then, a single candle on the mantel, lit, burning steady. In the morning, a real estate agent stopped by. The farmhouse had been sold in an estate auction after Desmond disappeared. They found no trace of him, only the journal. A cold, untouched house. and a candle on the mantel, one that never melted. The agent brought their daughter inside, 12 years old, as her mother spoke to the contractor. The girl walked to the mantel, fascinated by the old candle. She picked it up. The flame sparked, lit, and from the dark hallway behind her, a child's voice whispered, "Desmond, Story 6, the portrait that erased me. They say photographs capture a moment in time. But what if the photo keeps changing? What if the moment doesn't want to stay still? And what happens when it decides you no longer belong in it?" This is the story of a woman named Erin. She was 33, an archivist, quiet, methodical, and deeply obsessed with preserving the past, which made her the perfect person to inherit her grandfather's massive collection of historical items after he died. His house, located in a rural corner of Maine, was packed with shelves, boxes, and filing cabinets full of letters, records, newspapers, and photos. So many photos. Old ones, cabinet cards, daguerreotypes, family portraits so faded they looked like ghosts even before time had its way with them. She spent the first few weeks sorting, cataloging, scanning, and uploading to an external drive. That's when she found it, tucked in the back of a drawer in a desk. He always kept locked. A portrait, roughly 11 by 14 inches. Sepia tone, ornate brass frame. It showed a group of 8 people standing in front of a large house. 7 adults, 1 child. They wore clothes from the early 1900s. Stiff collars, gloves, wide skirts. Each expression solemn, but clear. She didn't recognize any of them. The back of the photo was blank. She placed it on a side table, intending to research the people in it later. But the next morning, something changed. There were now 7 people in the photo. The child was gone. At first, Erin assumed she had miscounted. Maybe the image had faded more under light. She checked the high-res scan on her computer. The child was there, clear as day. She pulled the physical photo closer. Still gone. She blinked, and something else caught her eye. The position of the adults had shifted slightly, their heads tilted at new angles. One man had turned slightly toward the camera, though he had been facing left before. She rescanned it, compared both files. They weren't the same. And on the second scan, in the background, the windows of the house had darkened. That night, she dreamed of a house with no doors, just halls, endless rooms with wallpaper that peeled like skin, and at the center, hanging above a fireplace, the portrait. But in the dream, she was in it, standing on the far right, expression blank, hands folded. She woke up sweating. The photo lay on her desk, not where she left it. The frame was warm to the touch, and when she looked again, there were now 6 people in the image. By the third morning, Erin avoided looking at the portrait. She left it face down on the desk, a folder placed over it like a paperweight made of denial. But it didn't help, because something else had started changing. Her phone. She went to send a message to her sister and realized she wasn't in her contact list. In fact, there were only a few names there now. No call history, no texts. She checked her email. Most of her archived conversations were gone. She tried logging into her social media. Invalid credentials. Her name didn't bring up any results. Not even old photos. She opened the gallery on her phone. Every photo she had appeared in over the past 10 years, she was gone from them. A birthday party in 2018. Everyone smiling, arms around nothing where she should be. A vacation in 2020. The beach chair beside her friend's umbrella was empty. Her apartment, her dog, her ex, all there, only she was missing. And in some of the older photos, where she once remembered smiling clearly, she can now see something else. A faint shadow where her outline used to be, like a stain burned into the moment where she no longer belonged. That night, she flipped the portrait back over. Now only 5 people remained, and one of them, a woman in a wide skirt with lace gloves, now wore Erin's face. Not perfectly, but enough. Same jawline, same lips, eyes duller. She stared at it for a long time, and then whispered, "What are you doing to me?" The candle on her desk flickered. No wind, no draft, just a single trembling flame. And then the room filled with a sound like distant photographic flashes, hundreds of shutters clicking at once. Her laptop screen blinked. The photo of the portrait opened on its own. It was updating. Live. The woman wearing her face began to smile. Erin backed away from the desk. She ran to the bathroom, stared into the mirror. At first, everything looked normal, but then her face took longer to react. She blinked. Her reflection hesitated. She waved her hand. The reflection waved back, but with the wrong hand. And for a split second, her eyes looked at her with recognition, as if from the other side of the glass. She screamed, turned off the light. The reflection didn't go away. It just kept watching. Erin didn't sleep that night. She sat at her desk with the portrait covered, her laptop open, trying to find herself. Her name returned no results. Her articles, her thesis, her published records, all gone. Even the college where she'd worked had no listing for her. Her ID number had been archived under inactive, no record of hire. The only trace she found was a single blog post from 2014, a blurry group photo from a conference. The caption read, "Me and the team from the archives." One of them asked not to be tagged. Haha. The person beside the woman taking the selfie had no face. Not blurred, just blank space. Like the outline of a person was there, but nothing filled it. Desperate. Erin returned to her grandfather's filing cabinets. She dug through folders, old letters, envelopes, then something strange. An unlabeled manila envelope. Inside, a list of names. A hand-drawn sketch of the portrait she'd found, only with different faces. A single page with one sentence repeated over and over. "They stand where we once belonged." On the back of the page, written in her grandfather's distinct handwriting, "Every 20 years, it changes. One disappears. One takes their place. It doesn't choose at random." At the bottom of the list, 3 names had been crossed out. Next to the 4th, her name, Erin Margaret Calloway. No line through it. Not yet. She checked the names above hers. One Luther G. Clark was listed as removed 1982. She searched the name. Nothing. Not even a death certificate. But a local newspaper archive had one article. Man reported missing in rural Maine. Investigation stalled after no evidence of entry or exit. The article included a photo of Luther, a man in his late 20s. Familiar. She ran back to the portrait. There he was, second from the left. No longer there in the current version, but there in her first scan. He had been replaced, like the others, just as she was being replaced. That night, she left the portrait face down again. But the next morning, she found it hung on the wall, centered perfectly. And now, only 4 people remained. The woman who wore her face was smiling wider. And the house behind them? It was no longer faded and distant. It was her grandfather's house. Erin couldn't explain how the portrait had mounted itself on the wall. There were no nails, no wires, no marks of movement. And yet there it was, centered above the fireplace, perfectly level, as if it had always been there. She tried to take it down, but when her fingers touched the frame, her skin tingled, like static, like touching an old TV screen left on too long. She flinched, then looked again. The portrait had changed again. Now only 3 people remained. But something else was different. Something she hadn't noticed until now. The remaining figures were sharpening, their details becoming clearer. The woman with Erin's face now wore a modern jacket, boots like the ones Erin kept by the back door, a scar on her knuckle, just like the one Erin had since childhood. And the other 2, they were watching her, no longer staring straight ahead like before. Now their eyes were turned slightly toward her, tracking her, studying, waiting. That night, she heard footsteps, but not from upstairs. Inside the walls, shuffling, dragging, moving from room to room, slow and deliberate. The house groaned as if under pressure. She ran to the front door. It wouldn't open, not stuck, just wouldn't respond. She turned the knob. It spun freely, like it wasn't connected to anything. The windows showed only blackness outside. Not night, just absence. No trees, no stars, no light, as if the house now existed inside the photograph itself. She ran back to the living room. The portrait glowed softly, a dim, sepia shimmer pulsing through the frame. The floor beneath it was warm. She dropped to her knees and heard something, a heartbeat, not hers, slow, steady, heavy, coming from inside the wall. She pressed her ear to the floorboards. A voice came through, her own voice, but older, softer, saying, "You're already here." She stood, backed away, but the room stretched. The hallway behind her lengthened by feet, then meters, then impossible space. She turned to run, but the hallway looped back to the living room. The portrait now covered the entire wall, and in it only 2 people remained. One was her. The other was just a shadow. No face, no details, just a silhouette. But it was holding her hand. Erin stood frozen. The portrait, now the size of an entire wall, pulsed like a living thing. The 2 remaining figures inside it were no longer still. They moved, their hands shifted, their heads tilted toward one another, and the shadow figure, the one holding her hand, began to fill in, first the outline, then a faint face, eyes like mirrors, a mouth not smiling, not frowning, just open, as if whispering something no one could hear. Erin backed away, but there was nowhere to go. Every doorway led back to the portrait. Every hallway looped into itself. Even the stairs dissolved into blank walls. The house wasn't a house anymore. It was a frame. She turned to run, but her feet no longer felt solid. They barely made sound, like she was lighter now, fainter. She reached for her phone to call someone, anyone, but the screen didn't respond. It was blank. Not black, white, empty. Her reflection in the screen blinked, but she hadn't. She ran to the mirror in the bathroom. She wasn't there. The room reflected perfectly. But she was missing, not invisible, just absent, like the mirror no longer knew who to copy. She tried to scream. No sound. Her voice had gone first. Back in the living room, the portrait flickered, Now only one person remained, and it was no longer Erin. The woman in the photo looked like her, but the eyes were different. Calmer, satisfied. The shadow was gone, and the house behind her, once old and faded, now looked restored. Clean windows, new paint, like time had restarted, but without Erin in it. The next day, a realtor arrived at the Calloway property. The house had sat empty for years. No known heirs. No official record of the last occupant. The neighbors barely remembered anyone ever living there. "It's strange," the agent said, flipping through her clipboard. "There's no history on this place." The front door creaked open. Dust coated everything, except for one item. A single portrait on the wall, sepia-toned, framed in antique brass. One woman standing in front of the house, alone, calm, unmoving. The agent stared at it for a moment, felt like she'd seen the woman before, but couldn't remember her name, or where they'd met, or if they had met at all. She turned away. The flame-shaped glow inside the portrait dimmed, and somewhere far beyond the frame, in halls without doors and mirrors without reflection, Erin stood silently among hundreds of portraits, all of them watching, all of them waiting. Before we continue, just a thought. Have you ever noticed how some rooms feel different at night than they do during the day? Like the walls are listening, or the shadows are waiting for something? Maybe it's your mind playing tricks. Or maybe this next story will explain why. The night watchman who heard things underground. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stood in a place that felt unfinished? Not just because it was under construction, but because it felt like something beneath it had never stopped building? This story is about a man named Elias, 58 years old, ex-construction worker turned night watchman. He didn't talk much, didn't need much, didn't believe in ghosts or curses or anything that didn't wear steel-toed boots. So when he was offered the job watching over the abandoned excavation site outside of Cleveland, he said yes without hesitation. The site was a failed development project. Some luxury condos that had run out of funding halfway through. All that remained was a pit 30 feet deep, lined with half-finished retaining walls, metal scaffolding, and rebar sticking out like bones. No real structures, just concrete and dirt. But there had been accidents. One man went missing during the final weeks of construction. Another was found at the bottom of the pit, spine shattered, eyes wide open. After that, the company shut it all down. Didn't even bother to clean the place up. Just post a sign. No entry after dark. That's where Elias came in. His first few nights were uneventful. The only light came from a trailer office at the edge of the site. He had a lantern, a thermos of coffee, and an old radio that only picked up static. He did rounds every hour, checked the fence, walked the perimeter. The pit stayed quiet, still heavy with silence. But on the fourth night, he heard something. At first, it was just a low thumping, rhythmic, like someone knocking gently from far below. He thought it was just settling earth, maybe rodents. But then came the chanting, low, muffled, not in English, not angry, not urgent, just steady, like a prayer looped under the soil. He leaned over the edge of the pit, listened, nothing. He lit a cigarette, shrugged it off. But the moment he turned his back, the knocking started again. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, like code. He didn't sleep well the next morning. Dreamed of hands pushing up from beneath gravel. He told himself it was just nerves. The next night, same thing. This time louder, Not just knocks. Scratching, like fingers dragging across wood. Except there was no wood down there, only concrete. He started keeping his rounds shorter, stayed closer to the trailer. He tried playing the radio louder. Didn't help, because the noise wasn't outside anymore. It was beneath him, in the floor, in the pipes, in the silence between his thoughts. On the seventh night, Elias brought a flashlight and a crowbar. He wasn't afraid. Not yet, just tired. Tired of the knocking. Tired of the whispering. Tired of wondering if he was losing his mind or if something was trying to speak through the dirt. Around midnight, he climbed down into the pit. The ladder groaned beneath his weight. 30 feet below ground, the air was damp. Still, it smelled like copper and wet stone. His boots crunched over gravel and fragments of shattered concrete. His flashlight cut through the dust. He walked slowly, circling the bottom of the site. Everything looked the same as it had during the day, except there was a wooden crate near the far wall, half buried in rubble. He didn't remember seeing it before. It looked old, too old to be part of the modern construction. No labels, no hardware, just thick, rotting planks bound together with blackened rope, and it was moving, just barely, as if something inside it was shifting with breath. Elias froze. The knocking began again, but now it wasn't muffled. It was coming directly from the crate. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. He stepped closer, pressed the end of his crowbar against the lid. The wood was soft, too soft, like flesh. He pulled away, but the crate knocked again. And this time, the chanting started. Louder, still not in English, still not human. The words echoed through the pit walls, low and slow, like teeth grinding through water. And then, from inside the crate, a voice, his own voice, whispering, "Don't let them forget me." He staggered backward, dropped the flashlight. The beam spun wildly across the walls, flashing over shapes, symbols, carved into the stone around the crate. Circles, eyes, a spiral of hands reaching inward, and the dirt beneath his feet shifted, like something was turning over beneath the surface. He grabbed the flashlight and climbed the ladder 2 steps at a time. He didn't look back. Didn't stop until he was inside the trailer, door locked, hands shaking. Outside, the pit had gone quiet again. The next morning, he called construction office, asked for records. They said no crate was ever documented. No wood materials were ever buried. That part of the land had been solid before excavation, but Elias didn't believe them. Not anymore. He'd heard his own voice from inside that box. Elias returned to the site just before dusk. He brought kerosene. He brought a lighter. He brought a prayer, whispered under his breath, even though he didn't believe in much of anything anymore. He had spent the day trying to forget the voice that came out of the crate, his own voice. Don't let them forget me. But how could he forget that? He climbed back down into the pit. The crate was still there, untouched, unmoving, but the ground around it had cracked, as if the earth had breathed outward during the night. He poured the kerosene slowly, all over the wood, into the cracks, around the symbols on the floor, and then he lit it. The flame caught fast, bright yellow and red, but no smoke rose. No heat hit his skin, and instead of the wood blackening and curling into ash, the crate absorbed the fire. It soaked it in, like a sponge. The flames twisted, folded in on themselves, turned blue, then violet, and the chanting began again. Only this time, it wasn't under the pit. It was around him. The walls echoed with voices. Some male, some female, some that didn't sound human at all. One phrase, repeated over and over. One must stay. One must speak. One must stay. One must speak. Elias stumbled back. He tried to climb the ladder, but it was gone. Gone. The walls stretched higher, endless. The pit was no longer 30 feet deep. It was a chasm. He turned, looked back at the crate. It had opened, and inside was nothing. No bones, no body, no object, just blackness. And in that blackness, he saw himself, standing at the top of the pit, looking down, expressionless, still watching. He screamed. No echo, only silence. He backed into the far wall, breathing fast. And then, a whisper from inches behind his ear. You were supposed to listen. In the trailer. The next morning, the day's shift guard arrived to relieve Elias. But the trailer was empty. No signs of struggle. No equipment out of place. Only Elias's jacket, folded on the chair, and a single muddy handprint on the inside of the window, too large to be human. The replacement guard's name was Marcus, 33, new to night shifts, didn't ask questions. He was told the previous watchman had quit without notice. Too much quiet, they said, drove him nuts. Marcus figured it'd be an easy gig. Sit in the trailer, do a couple rounds, watch for trespassers. He wasn't told about the pit. He wasn't told not to listen too closely. The first night, he noticed a handprint inside the trailer window, larger than his own, dried, smelled like dirt and rust. He wiped it off, didn't think much of it. At midnight, he did his first round. The pit made him uneasy. He didn't like how it pulled the light into itself. He stood at the edge for a moment, listened, and thought he heard singing, faint, melancholy, like a choir underwater. He told himself it was wind through the rebar. But as he turned to leave, 3 knocks from below. He froze, waited, 3 more, steady, precise. He called out, "Anyone down there?" Silence. And then a voice, low, familiar. "Don't let them forget me." Marcus stepped back. He hadn't heard that voice in 10 years, not since his brother died in a mining collapse out west. But it was his voice, clear as day, calling up from the bottom of the pit. The rest of the shift passed in silence. He didn't sleep the next day. He looked up the site. Nothing online. No building permits. No demolition records. The company website was blank, as if the place never existed. That night, he brought his phone. He recorded the sounds, the knocks, the whispers. But when he played it back, only static. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., a voice in the recording. "You heard us. That makes you the voice now." He dropped the phone. The screen cracked. The trailer lights flickered. And outside from the pit, a figure stood at the edge, watching him, wearing a jacket, holding a crowbar, face hidden in shadow. And in the silence, the sound of chanting began again. One must stay. One must speak. No one saw Marcus after that shift. The company replaced him quietly. Didn't file a report. Didn't call the police. Just posted the same sign again. No entry after dark. And now, sometimes, if you walk by the old excavation site late at night, just close enough to hear the wind through the gravel, you might hear 3 knocks. And then a voice, yours, calling from below, waiting for someone to remember. Episode 2, the long-haul bus driver who took the wrong route. Let me ask you something. Have you ever taken a long-distance bus ride? The kind that stretches across hours of empty highways, strange rest stops, sleeping strangers beside you. The kind of ride where time doesn't feel real anymore? This is the story of a man named Jorge. He drove buses for over 20 years. Reliable, quiet, kept to himself. Night routes mostly. From Texas up to Oregon, across the border sometimes. He liked the silence. The long, empty roads. The way people fell asleep and let him disappear into the dark without questions. He'd seen weird things before. Runaway kids. Silent passengers who never blinked. People talking to empty seats. But nothing ever stuck with him until Route 217. It wasn't a real route. It wasn't in the system. But one night, dispatch called him. We got an overnight to Idaho. Private hire. Route's been mapped. GPS preloaded. Cash bonus if you don't ask questions. Jorge didn't ask questions. He picked up the bus from the depot. Full tank. Clean interior. There were 9 passengers already on board when he arrived. All silent. All seated. All facing forward. No one spoke when he greeted them. They looked normal, a little pale, dressed for colder weather. Even though it was warm out, he adjusted the mirrors, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot at 11:11 p.m. The first hour passed quietly. Jorge glanced in the mirror a few times. The passengers never moved. No one slept. No one used their phone. No one looked out the window. They just sat, hands in their laps, eyes forward. At 1:13 a.m., he passed a glowing road sign, now entering Cold Hollow. He'd never heard of it. Didn't show on the GPS. He kept driving. Snow began to fall, even though the forecast had called for clear skies. At 2:34 a.m., he checked the rear-view mirror again. There were 10 passengers. He pulled over, got up, counted again. 10, but he remembered 9. Clearly, one in the back. A man in a black coat. Hadn't been there before. He walked down the aisle. "Sir, are you just getting on?" No response. The man didn't move, didn't blink, just looked straight ahead. Jorge reached out. The man turned his head, slowly, and smiled. Too wide, too many teeth. Jorge stumbled back. The man didn't follow, didn't move again, just sat there. He returned to the driver's seat. The GPS had changed. New directions. A looping line. Destination now said home. He tried to turn around. The road behind him was gone. Just snow and pine trees. The headlights couldn't reach more than a few feet ahead. And behind him, none of the passengers were visible in the mirror anymore. Just empty seats. And the faint sound of breathing. Jorge didn't remember falling asleep. But when his eyes opened, the bus was still moving. Same road, same trees, same snow, fall without end. The radio crackled softly with static, though he hadn't turned it on. He checked the mirror again. Still no passengers in sight, just empty seats. But the breathing was louder now, like a slow wind weaving through the cabin. And when he adjusted the mirror, all 10 passengers were back. But they were closer, sitting in the front half of the bus, still facing forward, still unmoving, still watching something he couldn't see. He pulled over again. This time, the bus didn't stop immediately. It rolled a few feet past where he braked, as if it were reluctant to stop. He stepped out into the snow. No sound, no wind, no birds, no cold, just silence. He walked a few feet into the trees with his flashlight, then noticed something odd. The same mile marker was on every tree. Mile 0, mile 0, mile 0. He turned back toward the road, but the bus wasn't there. Just more trees. He spun around, disoriented, and then headlights blinked on in the distance, far away, but pointed straight at him. A bus, his bus. He walked toward it, but with every step, it didn't get closer. It got smaller, and inside, through the windshield, he saw himself, driving, expressionless, focused. He woke up behind the wheel, hands on the steering wheel, radio still crackling, the road endless. The GPS now said, "You are here." He looked in the mirror. The passengers were standing now, all 10 of them, facing the front of the bus, each one staring directly at him. No expression, no sound. Then, one by one, they began to smile. The man in the black coat stepped into the aisle, took one step closer, then another, and when Jorge tried to blink, he realized his eyes weren't responding. Neither were his hands. Neither were his feet. He was still, frozen, watching the man walk closer in the mirror until he reached the front, stood beside him, leaned down, and whispered, "Thank you for bringing us home. Now it's your turn." Jorge didn't know how long he'd been driving. He couldn't remember the last stop, couldn't remember the last real road sign. Only trees, snow, and faces in the mirror that grew more familiar each time he looked. They were changing, each passenger's face slowly morphing into someone he recognized. A cousin who died in a car crash, a neighbor who vanished years ago, a boy he saw once on a missing poster in El Paso. The man in the black coat, now sitting directly behind him, was himself, younger, smiling, watching. He tried to speak. No words. He tried to press the brakes. No response. His hands rested on the wheel, unmoving, like they were part of the machine now. The GPS blinked again. It no longer said, "You are here." Now it said, "Coal Hollow Terminal, 0.1 miles." The trees began to thin. The road widened. And ahead, lights, dim yellow ones, buzzing quietly. A platform appeared. Wooden, empty, covered in snow that never stuck. A small sign. Coal Hollow, last stop. The bus slowed on its own. Came to a stop with a soft hiss. No sound from the passengers. Until the doors opened. Then, all at once, they stood together, synchronized, and silently filed out into the snow. No bags, no voices, just footsteps, crunching across the ground until they disappeared into the woods. All except one, the man in the black coat, the one who looked like Jorge. He stepped off last, then turned around, and spoke for the first time. "Every driver gets one route. You brought them back. Now drive them again until someone else takes your place." He smiled, wider than any human should, and faded into the snow. The doors closed. The bus idled. Jorge's hands returned to the wheel, and behind him, 9 new passengers, all silent, all staring forward, all waiting to be taken home. The GPS reset. Next stop, Coal Hollow. Estimated time of arrival, 11:11 p.m. Episode 3. The funeral home assistant who prepared the same body twice. Let me ask you something. Do you believe the dead can return? not as ghosts, not as shadows, but as if they never left, as if they were just passing through and came back the same way they left, wearing the same face, the same silence. But something in their eyes says, "You buried me too early." This story is about a man named Clive. He was 41, quiet, clean, professional. Worked nights at a family-run funeral home just outside of Missouri. Did the preparation work. Cleaning, embalming, dressing the bodies. He'd done hundreds of them. Never flinched. Never believed in anything spiritual. Always said, "A body's just a body once the light goes out." That changed last fall. The call came in late. A middle-aged man found dead in his apartment. No signs of struggle. Heart failure, they said. Clive signed the paperwork. Received the body. Logged the name, Peter Mallory, age 53. He remembered the name because it was so ordinary. Nothing strange about Peter. His body was thin, clean, expression neutral. No marks, no signs of pain. Clive did the usual. Washed him, prepped him, set his hands, closed the eyes. He worked alone as always, music playing softly from the old speaker in the corner. All went smoothly until he began to stitch the mouth closed. That's when Peter's hand twitched. Just once. Fingers barely flexing. Clive froze. He checked the vitals. No heartbeat. No breath. No pulse. Dead. Absolutely dead. He told himself it was just muscle memory. A final nerve reflex. He'd seen it once or twice before. He continued. 2 days later, the body was gone. Buried. Routine. Clive moved on to the next one. Until the following week. A familiar name on the log sheet. Peter Mallory. Same age. Same address. Same cause of death. Clive blinked. Called the front office. "Is this a typo?" The receptionist checked. "Nope. Body just arrived." He walked to the back. Unzipped the bag. It was him. Peter. Same scar on his eyebrow. Same freckle on the cheek. Same stitch line along the jaw. The one Clive had made himself. But no signs of decomposition. No embalming fluid smell. No trace of the makeup he'd applied just last week. The body was fresh. Untouched. He ran to check the records. Found the burial log. Peter Mallory was buried 6 days ago. Plot 17B. He drove to the cemetery. Found the headstone. Dug down just enough to confirm the coffin was still there. It was sealed, unopened, and inside a weight, a body. But the Peter on his prep table was back in the mortuary, waiting, still, as if nothing had ever happened. Clive didn't sleep that night. He sat in the embalming room, staring at Peter Mallory's body. Same features. Same faint scar above the left brow. Same skin tone. Same hands, long, slightly crooked middle finger on the right hand. Identical. But this time, Clive noticed something new. A bruise on the chest. Dark. Spreading outward like a ripple. It hadn't been there the first time. He was sure of it. And the strangest part? It looked fresh. As if the man had just died hours ago. The next morning, Clive checked the intake forms again. Signed by the coroner. Same name. Same address. Same time of death. Exactly 1 week apart. Peter Mallory. He ran a background check. There were no public records for Peter. No driver's license. No social security. No family listed. No obituary. Nothing. Just one line in the funeral home system. Prepaid client. Reoccurring file. Clive blinked. Reoccurring? He clicked into the system's back end, accessed the archive logs. What he found chilled him. Peter Mallory's name had appeared 14 times, going back over 50 years. Always the same name, always the same address, always the same appearance, same age, same body, always arriving within 7 days of the last burial. He printed the records, took them to the director of the funeral home, Mr. Jenner, an old man, pale, quiet, always watching. When Clive handed him the papers, Jenner didn't even flinch. He just said, "You're not the first to notice." Clive asked, "Then why do we keep burying him?" Jenner folded the papers slowly. "You don't bury Peter Mallory to get rid of him. You bury him to delay him." "Delay what?" Jenner looked him in the eye, then said, "His return." That night, Clive snuck back into the embalming room. Peter's body was still there, still perfect, still stitched at the mouth. But now, his eyes were open, just a sliver, enough to see the whites, and something moving beneath the surface. Not decay, not blood, but shadows, twisting, coiling, as if the body were filled with smoke instead of flesh. And then, one of Peter's fingers twitched again. This time it curled toward Clive, like a beckoning. Clive stood frozen in the embalming room. Peter's eyes were now fully open, cloudy but focused, and they were looking directly at him. The stitched mouth hadn't moved, but Clive could hear something. Not out loud, not in the room, but inside his own mind. A whisper, low, like something speaking through 100 layers of soil. It has to be someone. One soul in, one soul out. Clive stepped back. Peter's hand shifted again. Then the other, both arms rising slowly. Too slowly, as if the body were fighting its own stiffness. And then he sat up. The stitches on his mouth stretched, but didn't tear. His jaw remained shut, but the whispers grew louder. Images flooded Clive's head. Flashes of places he'd never been. A narrow tunnel of roots and bone. A door beneath a lake. A woman clawing at her own reflection. And rows of bodies, each one with Peter Mallory's face, until one row showed Clive's. And beneath every version of Clive. Next, he ran, out of the room, out into the night. He drove 3 towns over. Didn't sleep, didn't eat, just stared at the highway lines until morning came. When he returned to the funeral home, no one remembered Peter, not the receptionist, not Jenner, no records in the system. The name Peter Mallory was gone, but the embalming room was cold, and on the table, Clive's jacket, folded, neat, with a single piece of paper on top. No handwriting, just one sentence typed. "Now they'll bury you." That week, a new body arrived at the funeral home. No ID, no known family. Estimated age, 41. Male, slight scar above the left eyebrow. His name on the intake form, Clive Mallory. Episode 4. The janitor who cleaned the school after midnight. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked through your old school at night? No students. No noise. Just a hum of old lights. The echo of your own footsteps. And the feeling that the building remembers more than it lets on. This story is about a man named Milton. He was 62. Worked as a janitor at a public middle school in Ohio. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet. And that's what Milton liked most. The quiet. He worked a late shift. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Alone, just the way he wanted it. He knew every inch of building, every creaky locker, every broken light. He'd worked there for over 20 years. But something changed one Tuesday in October. He was mopping the second floor when he noticed it. A hallway he didn't recognize. It wasn't new. The floor tiles were old, scuffed. The lights were flickering. The lockers were rusted. But it wasn't there the night before. He pulled out the map taped to his cart. There was nothing between rooms 213 and 215. Just a wall. But now there was a hallway, about 50 feet long. At the end, a single classroom door, half open. He thought maybe he'd miss a renovation. Maintenance didn't always update him. So he walked down the hall. As he moved, the sound changed. The hum of lights faded, replaced by a soft static, like a television left on in another room. He reached the door. The plaque read, Room 237A. That wasn't a real room. Not in this school. Not in any wing. He stepped inside. It was a classroom. Desks. Chalkboard. Books on the shelves. But all of it was old. Too old. Chalkboard instead of whiteboard. Desks with inkwells. No computer ports. No lights. Just windows covered in heavy gray curtains. And worst of all, dustless, like it had just been cleaned. He backed out of the room, turned around. The hallway behind him was gone. Just a blank wall, painted, seamless, as if he'd never come that way. And when he turned back, the classroom was no longer empty. A woman stood at the front, teacher's dress, hair pulled into a tight bun, eyes wrong, too far apart, too round. Her voice scraped across the walls. You're not supposed to be here after the bell. Milton blinked. The woman at the front of the classroom hadn't moved. Her arms hung stiff at her sides. Her mouth was smiling, but her eyes didn't blink. She stepped forward, not walked, glided. Her shoes didn't touch the ground. Milton turned and ran. But the door had closed. No handle, no lock, no exit, just wood. He turned back. The classroom was full now, every desk occupied by children, but not children, figures, wearing uniforms too stiff, skin too smooth, hair painted onto scalps. Some stared at the chalkboard. Some stared at him. One boy's mouth opened, and a dial tone came out. Milton pounded on the door. It opened on its own. He stumbled out, found himself back in the main hallway. Lights buzzing, maps still on the wall. The mystery hallway was gone. He ran, downstairs, out the emergency exit, into the parking lot. But the lot was empty. No stars, no wind, just a single school bus, headlights on, facing the door. He turned. The building was different, older, crumbling. No security lights, no banners, no modern signs, as if he'd stepped 50 years into the past. He went home, didn't sleep. Next day, he told the principal. She looked at him with concern. There's no room 237A, Milton. I was inside it. She shook her head. We've never had that many rooms. He checked the blueprints in the archives. No record. But there, tucked in the back of a folder, he found an old disciplinary notice, typed on a typewriter. Date, October 1966. Custodian Milton J. Reeves reprimanded for entering room 237, A without authorization. Same name, same handwriting as his, same signature. Only Milton was born in 1961. That night, the hallway was back. Same flickering light, same door at the end, same room number. This time, the door was already open. and inside, a mop bucket, waiting, with his name etched into the side. Milton J. Reeves, night shift. Milton stared at the mop bucket. His name hadn't been written on a tag or a label. It was carved, etched deep, like the metal had softened just to accept it. And next to the name, a date. October 13th, 1966. Exactly 56 years ago to the day. But the bucket was spotless, like it had never been used, or never needed to be used. Until now, he stepped into room 237A. The mannequins weren't there tonight. Neither was the teacher. The classroom looked waiting, as if it had been reset. A single note was left on the teacher's desk. Typewritten, you must finish what they didn't. 1 week. Clean everything. No mistakes. Below it, a list, floor, desks, windows, mirrors, basement. Milton blinked. Basement? This school didn't have one. But the note didn't care. He picked up the mop. It was heavy. Too heavy. He dipped it into the water. But when it came out, the mop was black, covered in thick sludge that smelled like rotten oil. He tried to wipe it on the floor. The stain he left behind began to move. Not spread, not soak in. Move, like something beneath the tiles was shifting to meet it. He dropped the mop. The door slammed shut. Behind him, the chalkboard began to write on its own. One word. Continued. For 6 nights, Milton returned. Each time, the list grew shorter. Each time, the building changed. The lights dimmed faster. The mannequins returned, this time watching him from the windows. The teacher never spoke again, but her eyes blinked, and sometimes they followed him. He cleaned. He mopped. He scrubbed a floor that bled if he stopped for too long. He washed mirrors that didn't reflect the room he was in. And every night, the last item on the list remained. Basement. On the 7th night, the floor of room 237A opened. Stairs. Downward. Made of stone. Lit by flickering lamps that weren't electric. He descended. The mop in his hand felt colder now, like it belonged down there. The air grew damp. And at the bottom of the stairs, a corridor filled with rows of janitor buckets, each with a name, each with a date, none more recent than the 1970s, all facing the same wall. At the far end, one empty space, a slot, waiting. Milton placed his bucket inside. It clicked, and the wall in front of him became a mirror. He saw himself, older, tired, but not just tired, worn, like he'd been cleaning this place for longer than a week. He blinked. His reflection didn't. It smiled and said, "Shift complete. Next janitor arrives tomorrow." The next night, a new custodian took the night shift. Young, eager, didn't believe in ghost stories until he found a hallway between rooms 213 and 215, one that wasn't on the map. At the end, room 237A, and on the teacher's desk, a list. At the top, "Welcome, Milton." Episode 5. The grave digger who found a coffin that wasn't buried yet. Let me ask you something. When you think of a grave, what do you picture? Fresh earth, a shovel, a box being lowered in. But what if you arrived to dig the grave and found the coffin already waiting? Not buried, not old, just there, and inside, someone who looks like you. This is the story of a man named Reed, 47, grave digger for a small-town cemetery in Montana. Hard-working, private, prefer the night shifts, Said the ground was softer when the sun went down. No one asked what he meant. He worked alone. Didn't mind. Said the dead were better company than the living. Until the Thursday evening, he was sent to prep Plot 39F. The office of the family had paid in advance. Delivery was scheduled for the next morning. Reed grabbed his shovel, lantern, and thermos, walked out past the fence, where the older graves lay forgotten in long, crooked rows. Plot 39F was near the farthest edge of the cemetery. No lights, just dirt, thorns, and trees that leaned too close. When he arrived at the site, something stopped him cold. The grave was already open, perfectly dug. No soil nearby, like it had never been touched. And at the bottom, a coffin, shiny, black, new. It wasn't supposed to be there. No one had been scheduled to deliver it. He climbed down to inspect. No markings, no nameplate, but the lid was loose, not nailed shut. He pried it open, and inside was him. Eyes closed, hands folded, same scar above the right eyebrow, same silver ring, same shovel resting beside the body. Reed stumbled back, dropped the lantern. It didn't break, but the light went out, and in the silence, he heard breathing, but not from the coffin. From behind him, Reed turned. Nothing behind him. No shadows. No movement. Just a cold breeze slipping through the crooked trees. He climbed out of the grave, grabbed a lantern, still warm but unlit. He lit it again. The flame flickered low, unsteady, almost like it didn't want to stay. He looked back into the grave. The coffin was closed again, but he hadn't touched it. The lid was sealed, and the dirt he'd seen before now piled neatly beside the grave. Shovel stuck in the center. Waiting, he walked back toward the tool shed. It should have been a straight path. He passed an angel statue, then a line of rusted iron gates, then a row of infant graves from the 1930s, then Plot 39F, same pile of dirt, same closed coffin, same lantern flicker. He turned around, walked the other way, slower this time, counting steps, 25, 30, then Plot 39F again. Now the coffin was open, empty. He ran, north, south, didn't matter. No matter where he went, the same grave waited. Plot 39F. But something changed each time he returned. The air grew colder. The trees leaned in closer. The headstones changed angles, pointing toward the grave. And finally, on the fifth loop, there was a second coffin beside the first. Smaller, wooden, old-fashioned, the kind they stopped using decades ago. No lid this time, just a black sheet draped over something. That moved. Reed stepped closer. The sheet rose, barely, and he heard his own voice whisper from beneath it. "You left me here once. Now I'm leaving you." Reed backed away, tripped, fell against a headstone, looked up, a third coffin, this one still breathing. The wood rose and fell, steadily, rhythmically. He stared at it, whispered, "Who are you?" The breathing stopped. A hand slid up from inside, thin, gray, identical to his. It pointed at the pile of dirt beside the grave, then at him. Reed didn't move. The hand from the third coffin pointed at him again, then slowly lowered, disappearing beneath the lid. The wood sealed shut on its own. The breathing stopped, but the whisper returned. Low, close, inside his head. The job ends when you accept it. He turned to run again, but this time he didn't move. His legs wouldn't respond. He looked down. His boots were sinking, slowly, into the dirt. No mud, no struggle, just a soft pull, as if the cemetery had decided you've been walking above long enough. He yanked one foot free, then the other, fell back, gasping, and saw that the 3 coffins had changed. Now, only one remained. Open, empty, waiting, with a shovel across its chest, and his name carved into the lid. Reed Morrow, night digger, in service since 1999. Release, never. He screamed. No echo. The cemetery wasn't a place anymore. It was a loop, a ritual, a trap, and he had already dug too many graves for others, never realizing each one made his deeper. He stumbled to the headstone nearest him, tried to pull himself up, but the name etched into the stone was also his, not past tense, not in loving memory, just Reed Morrow, transferring positions, and then a figure stepped out from behind the angel statue, wearing the same uniform, same build, same tired eyes, but older, much older. The man walked calmly to the open grave, looked down at it, then at Reed, and said, "You're ready?" They always fight the last loop. Reed backed away. No, I'm not ready." The man placed a hand on his shoulder. It was cold, soft, not flesh, soil. You've already been buried, son. Now it's your turn to hold the shovel. The next morning, a new worker arrived at the cemetery. Young, fresh boots, tidy gloves. Asked the office assistant where Reed was. She looked confused. There's no Reed on the schedule, but he's been working nights here for years. She checked the file, shook her head. There's only ever been one night digger out there, and you're the first in a long time. The young man walked toward the backfields. Plot 39F was already open, lantern lit, shovel resting on the edge, and just beneath the dirt, something whispered, "Welcome to the shift." Episode 6. The nurse who watched patients vanish without dying. Let me ask you something. Have you ever visited someone in the hospital and felt like there was something wrong with the room itself? Not the person, not the doctors. The room, like it had seen too much, held too many endings. This is the story of a nurse named Julie, 45, 10 years in emergency care, 6 in general recovery, no nonsense, steady hands, respected by her staff. Julie worked at St. Hedwig's Medical Center in Michigan. The hospital was old, brick hallways, polished floors, flickering elevator lights, but it was reliable until last March, when Room 205 was reopened. Room 205 had been sealed for over a year. Flooding issue, that's what they said. But Julie remembered the truth. A patient vanished from there. A man recovering from surgery. Vitals stable. Monitored overnight. Gone by morning. No signs of struggle. No security footage. No discharge papers. Just gone. And when they opened the door, the bed was still warm. Now 205 was active again. Julie's patient that night, Eleanor Price, 74, admitted for dizziness and disorientation. Vitals, normal. Speech, clear. Eyes, alert. She was fine, smiling even. Julie liked her immediately. Eleanor asked gentle questions, talked about her daughter, brought her own quilt from home, told Julie, "You got kind eyes." At 11:14 p.m., Julie checked her one last time. All good. Eleanor nodded. Thank you for being here. Julie smiled. I'll be back in 30 minutes. Eleanor said one more thing before she left the room. Don't let it in if it knocks, even if it uses my voice. Julie paused. What? Eleanor smiled, soft, but her eyes were terrified. I mean it. Then close her eyes. Julie left the room. Julie couldn't shake Eleanor's words. She'd heard strange things from patients before. Hallucinations, confusion, dementia. But Eleanor had been sharp, clear, and afraid in a way Julie couldn't explain. She made her rounds on the third floor. Room 212, 213, 214. All quiet. At 11:44 p.m., she returned to room 205. Door closed. Lights off. That was strange. She always left one light on for evening observation. She knocked gently. No response. She opened the door. The bed was empty. No Eleanor. No sheets pulled back. No quilt. No signs of movement. Just a faint humming sound. The monitor still displayed a slow, steady pulse. But the heart sensors weren't attached to anyone. She stepped into the room, and the monitor flatlined. One long tone. She ran to check the hall. No one had seen Eleanor leave. No security buzz at the door. The cameras? Offline. Of course. She reported the disappearance immediately. Security sweep. Maintenance check. Nothing. Her supervisor blamed her. You left the patient unattended. Julie protested. She was there. And then she wasn't. And camera feed? Offline. Convenient. They sent her home early. Told her to take a few days. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. She needed answers. So the next night, she came back. Not as staff, as someone visiting a friend. She stayed near 205. Waited. Nothing happened. Until 2:05 a.m. Knocking. 3 soft taps. From inside the room. She froze. Her hands trembled as she reached for the handle. But she remembered Eleanor's warning. Don't let it in if it knocks. She backed away. The knocking came again. Harder. Then a voice. Her voice. Julie, it's me. I'm cold. Please let me out. She looked under the door. No shadow. Just silence. And then a whisper at her ear. It gets in when you answer. She turned. No one there. She looked back at the door. It was now open, wide, and room 205 wasn't a room anymore. Julie stood in the doorway. The lights inside flickered like candlelight, but there were no candles, no bulbs, no walls, just fog. The entire room had been swallowed by a thick, pale mist. The hospital bed was gone. So was the monitor, the oxygen line, the 4-stand. Only one thing remained. Eleanor's quilt, folded on the floor. Still warm. Julie stepped in. The fog swallowed the hallway behind her. No more doors. No more nurses. No more sound. Only the soft hum of breathing. Somewhere deeper in the mist, she walked forward. Her shoes echoed, though the floor was carpeted now. A hallway stretched in front of her, too long, too narrow, and the walls lined with doors, each one marked 205, 205, 205, 205, each with a small glass window. Inside the first one, a patient sleeping. Not Eleanor. Someone else. Still breathing. Eyes twitching. Trapped in a dream they couldn't wake from. Julie opened another door. Another patient. eyes wide open, frozen, mouth parted as if mid-scream, but no sound. A third door, and this time, herself, lying in bed, heartbeat monitor steady, chest rising and falling. But her eyes were missing, not bloodied, not hollow, just blank skin, a voice behind her. They can't see anymore. That's why you're here. She turned. Eleanor stood in the fog, but her face was wrong. Soft, too smooth, and her mouth moved, but her voice didn't come from it. You see too much, Julie. That's the problem. Room 205 doesn't take everyone. It waits for watchers. Julie backed away. No, I'm not staying. Eleanor tilted her head. You already did. And pointed at a fifth door. Inside, Julie, sitting in a hospital chair, staring blankly at the wall. No movement, no blinking, just stillness. A nurse walked past in the real world. Didn't look at her, didn't see her, like she wasn't there. Julie ran, down the hall, through the fog, calling for help, but the doors kept repeating. 205, 205, 205, 205, and each one held another version of her, sleeping, screaming, watching, smiling, until she reached the final door. It was made of glass, and on the other side, St. Hedwig's Hospital, the hallway, the lights, her reflection. She placed her hand on the glass. It was warm, soft, and then, from the other side, her reflection moved on its own, smiled, and walked away, leaving Julie inside. Just a moment before the next story. Have you been sleeping well lately? No strange dreams? No shadows moving just before you open your eyes? Sometimes, the stories we hear at night find their way into the dark corners of our minds. Let's see what this next one leaves behind when the screen goes black. Story 1. The Mirror in Room 313. Do you hear the rain? Take a moment. Close your eyes if you want. Let that sound settle in your bones. There's something soothing about it, isn't there? That soft rhythm like a lullaby from the earth itself. Now tell me something. Where are you listening to this right now? Are you in your car? In bed? Lying on the couch with headphones on? And what time is it where you are? Because the story I'm about to tell you only ever happens at night. And only when it's raining, just like now. This is the story of Evan, a man of reason, logic, and clean-cut skepticism. He was the kind of guy who laughed at ghost stories and rolled his eyes at people who talked about energy or bad vibes. He was a claims adjuster, traveled a lot, spent more time in cheap hotels and lonely roadside motels than he did at home. He thought he'd seen everything, until one rainy night, something saw him. It was supposed to be a quick stop. The highway had flooded. His GPS led him through back roads and winding forest trails until he reached a tiny inn he had never seen before on any map, Maple Hollow Inn. It looked like it had been standing for over a century. 3 floors, faded green shutters, a sagging porch, and a neon sign buzzing faintly through the downpour. The place looked almost swallowed by trees. No other buildings around. No lights in sight. Just the steady hiss of rain and the hum of that flickering sign. He stepped inside. The lobby smelled like damp wood and forgotten years. There was a woman behind the desk, gray-haired, pale, wearing an expression that looked halfway between bored and worried. Without looking up, she said, "You can take room 313. If you're not too bothered by the mirror." He chuckled awkwardly. "Mirror?" She raised her eyes slowly. "Some guests say it reflects things that aren't really there. but we don't have many rooms left tonight." He shrugged. He was soaked, exhausted, and frankly didn't care about local folklore. "I'll take it." He walked up to the third floor. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lit by low amber lights. The carpet was old and smelled faintly of mold. Room 313 was at the very end of the hall. When he opened the door, the first thing he noticed was the silence. Even with the rain outside, the room was too quiet. The second thing he noticed was the mirror. It was massive, not just big, imposing. It stood directly across the bed, framed in dark carved wood, intricate patterns like twisting vines and staring eyes. The glass itself was spotless. Too clean, actually, like someone had polished it constantly. He unpacked, took a hot shower, and sat on the bed with his laptop. Rain tapped softly on the window. The dim lamp lit the room in a golden hue. But no matter what he did, he kept glancing at the mirror. And here's where it began. At first, it was small. He moved and thought, just for a moment, that his reflection was slightly out of sync. A delayed blink, a hesitation. But every time he stared directly, it matched him perfectly. Maybe he was just tired. But that night, as he lay in bed, something kept him awake. He couldn't stop thinking about that mirror. Have you ever stared at your reflection too long in the dark? After a while, it starts to look less like you, more like a stranger, mimicking you with perfect precision. He got up, walked toward the mirror. His own tired face stared back at him. His hands trembled slightly from the cold. He leaned closer. Their noses almost touched through the glass. Then he blinked, and the reflection didn't. His heart skipped. He leaned back, trying to laugh it off. "I'm overtired," he whispered. But the mirror didn't let go. Even when he turned off the lights, laid back down, and tried to sleep, it was there, facing him, watching. That night, he dreamt of standing in that same room, but in the reflection, he was not alone. There was something behind him in the mirror, a shadow. It moved differently. It wasn't just a dream. It felt like memory. He woke up with a jolt. The air was freezing. The mirror was fogged, as if someone had breathed on it, except he hadn't. And the room was ice cold. There was no reason for fog to form. He checked out early that morning, but as fate would have it, the roads were still closed. He returned that evening, against his better judgment, back to 313. The second night, the air was heavy, thick with something unsaid. The lights seemed dimmer. The mirror looked sharper. He sat on the bed, stared at it directly, determined to prove it was all in his head. That's when it happened. The reflection began mouthing words. No sound, just lips moving, over and over. The same phrase. "You left me." Evan froze. He mouthed, "What?" The reflection smiled. Blood began soaking its shirt, slowly from the chest down, staining everything. Evan stumbled back, eyes wide. He turned on every light, paced, tried to call the front desk, but no one answered. He rushed downstairs. The lobby was dark, empty, except for one thing. A dusty black and white photograph on the wall. It showed the hotel in the 1950s. He leaned closer, and there it was, room 313's window, boarded up. He checked the date, 1957. Later, he'd find out that room had been sealed for years after a man named Harold Brenner took his own life there. They say he stood in front of the mirror and whispered to it for hours before doing it. And no matter how many times they removed the mirror, it always came back. Evan never went back. But sometimes when it rains and he catches his reflection in windows, elevator doors, even puddles on the street, he sees that same reflection, bloodstained, mouthing the same phrase. You left me, and now just between us, have you looked into a mirror lately? Really looked? Did your reflection blink at the exact moment you did? Or was it just a little late? Because if it was, maybe someone's still waiting. For you. Story 2, the tenant upstairs. Can you still hear the rain? Don't answer out loud. Just feel it. Let it fall into your ears like soft whispers. Let it settle around your shoulders like a heavy blanket. And while you sit there, wherever you are, I want you to ask yourself something. Who lives above you? Is there someone in the room right above yours? Can you hear their footsteps sometimes? Can you tell what time they go to bed? Now, let me ask this. Have you ever been sure someone was there, but when you checked, no one was? This story begins with a woman named Claire. She had just moved into a small apartment building in a quiet part of Oregon. Nothing special, just one of those old brick complexes built in the 50s. For floors, narrow staircases, old elevator that groaned every time it moved, but it was cheap, safe, and surrounded by tall pine trees. Claire loved the smell of rain on pine needles. It reminded her of childhood summers. She lived on the 3rd floor, apartment 3B. The first night, she heard footsteps overhead, slow, dragging, deliberate, back and forth. A soft thud every few seconds, as if someone was pacing with heavy shoes on hardwood. She looked up from her book, mildly annoyed. It was nearly 11 p.m., but it was an apartment after all. Noise was expected. The next morning, she passed the property manager on the way out. A friendly man named Greg, older, hunched, always in a dusty flannel shirt. She casually asked, "Hey, do you know who's in 4B? I could hear them pacing all night." Greg stopped walking, then said, "4BS empty, has been since October." Claire frowned. "Are you sure? I heard." "I'm sure," he cut in. He looked uncomfortable. "I just finished repainting it last week. No one's lived there in months." She let it go. That night, it rained again. And once more, the footsteps began. Back and forth, back and forth. Every few seconds, the same dragging thud, as if someone had nowhere else to go but couldn't stop walking. She recorded the sound on her phone. The audio was faint, but it was there. Clear footsteps, measured, repetitive. The next morning, she played it back for Greg. He sighed long and low. "You're not the first tenant to bring this up," he said. He didn't meet her eyes. She asked, "What do you mean?" He hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, said, "There was someone, years ago, lived in 4B, a man named Ellis." Claire listened, rain tapping softly on her jacket. Greg continued. He kept to himself. People said he was strange. Never left his apartment during the day. Only walked at night, always pacing, over and over. Then one day, we just didn't see him anymore. What happened to him? Claire asked. No one really knows. We went in after a week of silence. Found his apartment completely untouched, but he was gone. She asked if he'd moved. Greg shook his head. There were things in that apartment. Strange things. Claire pushed for details. Greg wouldn't give them. That night, she tried to sleep early. Told herself it was old pipes, shifting floorboards, an echo from another unit. But around midnight, the pacing started again. Only this time, it stopped right above her bed. She lay frozen. No music, no TV, no explanation, just silence. And then a tap from above, like someone slowly, deliberately tapping their foot. She got up, grabbed her broom, and hit the ceiling once. The tapping stopped, and then a knock, but not on the ceiling, on her front door. She turned slowly, heart pounding, opened it. No one was there, just the hallway, silent and empty. The only sound was the rain against the hallway window. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. And yet, every night after that, the footsteps returned, always around the same time, always the same pattern. She became obsessed. She set up cameras, audio recorders, even climbed the stairs one night at 3 a.m. and pressed her ear against the door 4B. Inside, she heard breathing, not the kind you hear when someone is sleeping, but something slower, more deliberate, a breath that was waiting. She backed away, told herself she was imagining things. But one night, everything changed. She woke to the sound of something falling above her, a loud crash, then dragging, as if something heavy was being pulled across the floor. She grabbed her phone, called Greg, begged him come check it out. Greg arrived 20 minutes later. Together, they climbed the stairs. Claire's hands trembled as he unlocked the door. They stepped into 4B. The room was spotless. No furniture. Fresh white paint on the walls. Empty, except in the center of the room, there was a pair of footprints. Wet footprints, leading from the center of the room to the corner where the wall met the floor, as if someone had been standing, watching. And on the far wall, in the paint, deep scratch marks, 4 of them, long, uneven, as if someone had tried to claw their way out or claw their way in. Greg turned white. He locked the door, told Claire to forget it, but she couldn't. The next day, she noticed something strange. The pacing above her no longer started at midnight. It started when she went to bed and stopped when she got up. It mimicked her. It watched her. One night, she stayed up on the couch, lights off, heart pounding. At exactly 2:17 a.m., she heard it. Not footsteps, breathing, but this time not from above. It was coming through the vent, near the corner of her living room. She crawled over slowly, barely breathing, and from inside the vent, she heard, "Why did you leave?" She screamed, moved out that week. Months later, the apartment complex burned down in an unexplained electrical fire. No one was hurt, but when they cleared the wreckage, firefighters reported something strange. The only room untouched by flames, 4B, inside, carved into the wall, over and over and over, was a sentence. Still walking, still watching, still here. Now, let me ask you again, do you hear anything above you? Are you sure it's just footsteps? Or is it someone trying to come back? Story 3, The Forgotten Room. Do you remember what your childhood bedroom looked like? Try it now. Close your eyes, even if just for a moment. Can you picture the walls? The position of your bed? The smell of the blankets? What toys were where? Now, imagine finding out that there was another room, a room in your childhood home that you had completely forgotten, a room no one talked about, that no one else remembered, but somehow you did. This is the story of James. He was a quiet man, lived alone, taught literature at a small university in Vermont, didn't have many friends, but that never seemed to bother him. He liked silence, rainy days, old books, old houses, Old stories. When his mother passed away, James inherited the house he grew up in, a 2-story Victorian tucked deep in the woods, 5 miles from the nearest gas station. He hadn't been back in over 20 years. Walking through it again was like entering a dream frozen in time. The same carpet, same creaky steps, dust clinging to the air like memory. It took him 2 full days to sort through her things, mostly clothes, letters, half-empty bottles of perfume that still smelled like Sunday mornings. But on the 3rd night, something happened. He was walking through the 2nd floor hallway, flashlight in hand, because the power had gone out, when he passed by a wall that felt off. You know that feeling when your body knows something before your mind does? The wallpaper here didn't match the rest. The wooden molding ended abruptly, and when he tapped the wall, it echoed, hollow. A few hours later, using a crowbar, he peeled away the panel, and behind it was a door, a small white wooden door, no taller than 4 feet. It had no handle, just a brass keyhole that was tarnished and crusted with time. The strange thing was, James remembered this door. He remembered it from a dream he had when he was a child. In the dream, he opened it, and something inside whispered, "Don't forget me." He thought it was just his mind playing tricks, a mix of grief, fatigue, and childhood imagination. But the door was real. He spent the next day searching the house for keys, in drawers and old coats, under rugs, and in his mother's jewelry box. He found it, a small, ancient key with the initials JB carved into the base. He didn't know anyone in the family with those initials. That night, with the wind howling outside and the rain starting to fall, James inserted the key into the lock. It clicked. He opened the door. Behind it was a staircase, narrow, dusty, descending into the dark. This didn't make sense. He'd lived in this house his entire childhood. There was no basement under this part of the house. And yet, here it was. He went down, flashlight shaking in his hand. The stairs creaked with every step. The walls grew tighter, closer, until finally he reached the bottom, and what he found was a room. A small room, square, old toys on a shelf, a child's bed, dust floating in the beam of his flashlight like slow snow. And on the wall, photos of him, James, at age 6, 7, 9, but he didn't remember these photos. Worse, he was wearing clothes in them he had never owned, and behind him, in every photo, was a girl, same age, blonde hair, wide glassy eyes, but her face was always blurred, not by motion, as if someone had scratched her out. Carefully, methodically, he checked the frame of one photo. On the back, in faded ink, James and Bethany. Summer, 1991. He whispered the name out loud. Bethany. It echoed in the room like a bell. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered. He tapped it. The light returned. That's when he noticed something else. On the small child bed lay a stuffed rabbit. Old, torn, with a ribbon around its neck. He picked it up and whispered again. Bethany. He didn't know why. He didn't remember her. But saying her name felt right and wrong. All at once. That night he dreamt. He was back in that room. But the walls were red. The floor was wet. And the girl, Bethany, stood at the foot of the bed. Her face was clear now. Eyes black. Mouth open. Skin pale like ash. She looked at him and whispered, "Why did you forget me?" He woke up screaming. The next morning, he went back down. The door was gone. Just a wall. As if it had never been there. But the stuffed rabbit, was in his hands, wet, smelling of soil. He left the house that week, moved back to the city, tried to forget. But every now and then, when it rains, he wakes up with dirt under his fingernails. And one night, not long ago, he found something under his bed, an old photograph of him at age 8, next to the girl, Bethany. Only now, her face wasn't scratched out. It was smiling, and in her lap was a rabbit on the back of the photo. Don't forget me again. Story 4. The journal and the floorboards. The rain hasn't stopped, has it? Do you hear it tapping on your window? Or is it just in your headphones? Doesn't matter. The rhythm is the same. Soft, unforgiving, endless. Let me ask you, have you ever found something in an old house that shouldn't have been there? Not a photo, not an object, something personal, something that belongs to someone who never existed, or maybe someone who no longer does. This story begins with a man named Noah. Noah was a preservation architect. His job was to document and prepare crumbling old buildings for restoration or demolition. He didn't scare easily. Old places were full of creaks, shadows, drafts. He saw them as dying lungs exhaling their last breaths. But there was one house he was sent to survey that never stopped breathing. It stood deep in the countryside of Maine, 3 hours from the nearest town, hidden behind trees that clawed at the wind. The client wanted the house documented before tearing it down. Noah arrived late in the afternoon. The sky was gray. Rain drizzled down, coating the windshield like a film of sorrow. The house had no path leading to it, no driveway, no signs of human presence for decades. And yet, the front door was ajar. He stepped inside. The air was thick, not just with dust, with something older, like mildew and memory. Wallpaper peeled from the walls like shedding skin. Cobwebs hung like curtains. And in the center of the house was a wooden staircase, each step a whisper under his boots. Noah began taking photos, notes, sketches, room by room, floor by floor, until he entered what appeared to be a child's bedroom. It was nearly intact. A small bed, a rocking chair, and a floorboard in the center that looked newer than the rest. He crouched, tapped it, hollow. He pried it open with the edge of his flashlight. Inside, wrapped in cloth and tied with twine, was a journal. Its leather cover was cracked, stained. The pages yellowed, edges curled. But the ink was fresh, as if it had been written just days ago. He flipped to the first page. There was no name, only the title, "For the One Who Finds Me." The entries were dated, but they didn't make sense. Some were from 1923, others from 1978. Some had no year, just a phrase. Rain again. Can't remember when it started. The writing changed. Different hands. Different styles, but the voice was always the same. It began as rambling thoughts, complaints about the weather, about dreams. Then it turned. Each entry became darker. Mentions of whispers from the walls, of figures outside the window, tall, thin, never blinking, of nights that lasted too long, where time stopped moving. And then this line: "There's something buried beneath the house. It hums at night." Noah felt a cold breath pass through the room. He checked his watch. An hour had passed, but he had only read 3 pages. He kept going. The entries began addressing him directly. "Are you reading this now? You shouldn't have come here. I can hear you breathing." He froze, looked around. The house was silent, except for the creaking. From downstairs, slow, measured, as if someone had just stepped inside. He stuffed the journal into his bag, heart racing, and left. Didn't lock the door. Didn't look back. That night in the motel, he opened the journal again. There were new entries, written in ink still wet. They described the motel room, the placement of the lamp, the angle of his feet, the color of his thoughts, and at the bottom of the page, stop reading, come back. He tore the page out, burned it in the bathroom sink. The next morning, the burned page was back in the journal, intact, with one addition. You can't destroy what remembers you. Noah quit the job, told the client the house was unstable. But the journal never left. He tried throwing it away. It reappeared on his pillow. He left it at a church. It showed up in his mailbox. He buried it and found it in his backpack, wet with dirt. Now, when it rains, the entries write themselves. He reads them aloud sometimes, not because he wants to, because he has to. And you're hearing this now. Maybe it's writing about you already. Maybe the next line in the journal is, they're listening in the rain. Story 5. The village that wasn't there yesterday. Can you still hear it? The rain, soft, persistent, a rhythm older than language. The kind of sound that opens doorways if you're not careful. I want you to pay close attention to where you are right now. Look around. Do you recognize everything in the room? Are you sure that chair was there a minute ago? Or that the hallway outside your door has always been the same length? This is the kind of story that plays with memory, not by accident, but by design. It begins with a man named Victor. Victor was an urban explorer, the kind who hunted forgotten places with nothing but a flashlight, a camera, and a stubborn desire to go where no one else would. Abandoned hospitals, burnt down theaters, ghost towns swallowed by sand. But one place found him. It was a night just like this. He had been driving through a fog-drenched region of northern Wyoming. Returning from an old mining settlement he had spent the day photographing. As the rain thickened, his GPS glitched. The screen flashed, froze, then rerouted him down a side road that didn't seem to exist. A single-lane, cracked asphalt path lined with pine trees. He could have turned back, but the explorer in him was curious. After 10 miles, the road ended at a wooden archway, carved into the arch. Belgrave. No mention of it on any map. No history online. No population signs. Just a word. And beyond it, houses. Old. Stone-built. Tiled roofs that slope too sharply. Windows too narrow. Chimneys that look like fingers reaching toward the clouds. Victor stepped out of his car, camera in hand, and realized there were no sounds. No birds. No wind. Even the rain was silent once he passed under the arch. He whispered to himself just to check, and didn't hear his own voice. It was as if sound had been suspended. But that didn't stop him. He wandered the main street, taking photos. Shops with signs in a language he didn't recognize. Benches carved from a single piece of wood. A fountain in the square, but no water. No people. Not even signs that people had ever lived there. Then he noticed the statues. Dozens of them, scattered throughout the village. Human-shaped. But their faces were blank. Smooth stone. No features. Some sat. Some stood. Some looked like they were running. Or trying to. He zoomed in with his camera. Stone. Definitely stone. But there was something wrong with the shadows. They didn't match the angle of the rain. He shrugged it off. Continued exploring. Eventually, he reached a chapel. Small, wood-roofed, No cross, just a circular symbol carved into the door. 12 marks around a ring. One was deeper, fresh. He stepped inside. The air smelled like ash and lavender. Candles lined the walls, lit but not flickering. And at the front, where an altar should have been, was a mirror. Old, cracked, but the surface shimmered like water. He lifted his camera, clicked. The photo didn't show the room. It showed him, standing in the village square, at night, with the statues moving behind him. He looked at the screen, looked back at the mirror. The surface rippled. And then he saw something behind him, not in the mirror, in the chapel, one of the statues. It had followed him. He turned. Nothing there. But the doorway was now blocked by a second statue. He hadn't seen that one enter. He stepped back. The air grew thicker. And now he could hear again, but not the rain. Whispers. Low. Circular. Chanting. A language his brain didn't understand. But his bones did. The mirror flashed. He saw himself again, only now he was one of them. A statue, arms frozen mid-motion, face blank. He ran, out of the chapel, into the square. But the streets had changed. They were longer, twisting. Some looped back on themselves. Some led into nothing. He saw his car at the end of one path, ran for it. But every time he turned, the statue was closer, moving when unseen, stopping when looked at. Some had mouths now, open, wide, as if screaming in silence. He reached the car, locked the doors, started the engine. It roared backward. The car moved in reverse on its own, deeper into Belgrave. He screamed, and finally heard his own voice again. The spell had broken, or paused. He threw the door open and ran into the woods. Didn't stop until he collapsed in the rain. Crawled until the trees thinned, and he found the highway again. A trucker picked him up at dawn. He told no one, deleted the photos, destroyed the camera. But 2 weeks later, a package arrived at his door. No return address. Inside his SD card, and a single photo printed on thick paper. The village square, empty, except for one statue, standing alone, camera in hand, blank face, and written in pen at the bottom, "Welcome back." Story 6. I keep waking up in the wrong version of my life. Are you awake right now? Are you sure you're awake? Wait. Don't answer yet. Don't just assume. Look around. Slowly, taking the walls. The ceiling. How does the light fall in the room? Is it exactly how you remember it yesterday? Is the air just a little heavier? Listen to the rain for a moment. That soft, consistent rhythm. You hear it too, don't you? Good. Now, let me take you somewhere. This is a story about a man named Eli. And I need you to stay with me, because what happened to him might already be happening to you. And the only way to know for sure is to pay attention. Eli lived what most people would call a normal life. He had a good job in IT support, worked remote from home, had a kind wife named Emma. They lived in a small, warm house with yellow curtains in the kitchen, and a dog named Beans who always barked at delivery drivers. Nothing extraordinary, but peaceful. And then one night, while the rain whispered on the windows and Emma was already asleep beside him, Eli closed his eyes and woke up somewhere else. At first, he thought it was a dream, a lucid dream. Maybe everything looked similar, but not quite right. The ceiling fan above the bed was spinning clockwise instead of counterclockwise. The window that usually faced the backyard now showed a view of the street. The wallpaper in the hallway had a subtle blue floral pattern he had never seen before. And Emma wasn't Emma. She looked similar. Same voice, same warmth, same scent on her skin when she kissed him good morning. But her name was Rachel. She smiled at him with a familiarity that made his stomach turn. "You were out cold last night," she said, handing him a coffee in a mug that said, "To the best husband." He stared at her. "Where's Emma?" Rachel blinked. "Who's Emma?" He looked around the kitchen. The toaster was in the wrong place. The magnets on the fridge spelled out unfamiliar names. And there was a calendar for a year that didn't exist, 2028. The photo on the wall showed them, him and Rachel, on a beach he'd never visited, smiling, happy. His heart started pounding. He closed his eyes, tried to breathe, tried to force himself awake. He passed out and woke up back in his bed, rain still tapping. Emma next to him, breathing softly. Everything normal. He wanted to believe it was a dream, maybe a trick of the brain. But part of him knew something had changed. The following week, it happened again. Then again, and again. Sometimes the shifts were subtle. Emma's hair was longer. The house had a second bathroom it never had before. Other times, the changes were seismic. He had a different job, lived in a different city, was married to someone else, or not married at all. And the most terrifying thing, each time he arrived in a new version of his life, everyone recognized him. They remembered things he didn't. They spoke of moments that never happened, and they told stories of him. Being someone he didn't remember being, he began documenting it. A journal, handwritten, paper only. He didn't trust digital anymore. He recorded dates, changes, dreams, side details like the scent of the soap in each version, how the sunlight hit the walls, what kind of coffee he drank. And slowly, he started noticing something far more disturbing than the shifting worlds. The versions were looping. One morning, he woke up in a version of his life where everything was perfect, back with Emma. Same job, same kitchen, everything how it should be. He cried, hugged her tightly, said he was sorry. She looked at him, confused. "What happened?" He said, "I think I came back." She asked, "From where?" He didn't know how to answer. Later that night, he opened his journal to write it all down and found the page already written. Same details, same words, same tears. Only, the entry was dated 4 months earlier. He flipped through the book. More entries he didn't remember writing. Conversations he hadn't had yet. Memories of places he didn't know existed. And all of them ended with the same phrase, in his handwriting: "You are not alone in here." The next morning, the mirror in the bathroom fogged up as he took a shower. When he stepped out, 3 words were written in the condensation: "Pick a side." He asked Emma if she wrote it. She shook her head, pale. I was asleep. That night, the rain came again, harder than ever, like it was trying to drown the sky. He fell asleep around 1 a.m. and woke up in darkness. Not his bed, not any place he recognized. He was lying on the floor, stone, wet, cold. He sat up coughing, looked around. He was inside a massive room, like cathedral, but without windows, doors, or walls. Just columns, disappearing upward into nothing. And around him were others. All of them looked like him. Dozens, maybe more, all wearing different clothes. Some older, some younger, some bleeding, some staring at him in silence. One stepped forward. "Only one of us gets to stay," it said. He ran. Somehow he escaped. Woke up in a version of his life that seemed familiar again. But something is off. Every time he looks into the mirror now, the man staring back is just a little slower. A blink delayed. A smirk that fades too late. Eyes that don't look afraid, because they're not his. He stopped sleeping last week. But it doesn't matter, because the version of him that's in control now isn't the original. Now, let me ask you one last time. Are you sure you're in the correct version of your life right now? Do the people around you feel slightly off? Is your reflection moving exactly when you do? Are the sounds in your room perfectly matched with your memory of them? If even one thing feels wrong, maybe you're not the one who woke up this time. And if that's true, then the real you is still out there, trapped, watching, waiting.